Barbara Zoller-Gringer. I'm the chair of this committee, and I want to welcome everyone here tonight and thank you for being here. In particular, the members of my committee who are always go out of their way on behalf of this committee. Now, I have two things before we start. One, I have an apology. It just dawned on me about a half hour ago that today is Shavuos, and we should have rescheduled this meeting for another day. So I apologize to anyone who is not at the meeting tonight because they're observing the holiday, and hopefully they will watch it on YouTube. So I apologize for that. We're usually very cognizant of those things, and I'm sorry. So as I said, good evening and welcome to our meeting. We have a very busy agenda. It's gotten bigger at the last minute. So I just want to set down some ground rules for tonight's meeting so there's no misunderstanding as we move forward. As you know, we always ask people to mute their microphones if they're not speaking. But before we do that, I just want to ask everyone to agree that for the course of this evening, you are planning to treat everyone on this call with dignity and respect. So if you could either just say yes or raise your hand, and then we'll ask you to mute yourselves. I see lots of hands, so I appreciate that. Thank you. So welcome to this meeting. It's hereby called to order. We're going to be recording it. As you know, this is Brooklyn Community Board 2, the Parks and Recreation Committee. It's May 17th, 2021. We ask our committee members to keep their cameras on. And again, as I mentioned, if you're not speaking, please mute. It really helps the proceedings. If you have questions that do not get answered this evening, please put them in the chat and follow up with the district office. And we will, try to get to your questions that way. And please, if you or someone you know needs a special accommodation in order to attend these proceedings, please contact the district office, hopefully at least 72 hours before our meetings begin. So to get back to what I wanted to say, just in terms of protocol for this evening, as usual, we are going to take questions from committee members first after the presentations have been completed. Then we will hear from other board members who might have questions, then from the public. And I just want to remind you that when we do get to public attendees tonight, it's 2 minutes, please. And Taya is going to be watching that closely. And I would also ask our board members to be succinct. If you're asking a question, please ask a question. And also, in the interest of time, if you are here with a group of friends or an organization, if there are several of you, please designate one person to be the speaker this evening. And we're going to try to avoid repetitions. So others may want to put their comments in the chat. And just as a reminder, we are online. And if people are not respectful, and you've all agreed, virtually all of you have agreed to be respectful, just a reminder that we can mute you or we can ask you to leave. So clearly we don't want to do that. So my goal is at the end of this meeting to be able to thank everyone for participating in a respectful, dignified manner. So I'm going to begin the meeting now and turn to my co-chair, Andrew Lastawecki, to introduce himself, and then go around. I want to thank Jennifer Melby. Jennifer, where are you? Okay, thank you for taking the minutes tonight. We really appreciate that. Carolyn?
Yes, Carolyn Hubbard Kamanan-Weary. I'm a member of the committee and of the board.
Lenny? You need to unmute.
Lenny Levington, Parks and Recreation Committee member.
Okay, and Dwight? Dwight Smith. Okay, thank you, Dwight. All right, now we have the agenda.
And Barbara, I'm
hopefully
here too.
Oh, I'm sorry, Suzanne. Thank you so much.
Hi,
It's 'cause
everyone.
I don't, usually I have everyone's name in front of me and I didn't tonight. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Quint. I'm a member of the Parks Committee and of the board.
And I'm a member of
So,
Parks.
thanks, Dwight. We're going to change the agenda just a little bit. We still have 3 presentations from the Parks Department. We're very fortunate this evening. We're just going to change the order of them a bit. So I think first we're going to hear about the updates, then about the great plans for Greene Playground and the Fort Greene Park update. We also have an addition to the agenda. We're going to hear from EDC talking about the naming of Willoughby Square. So we have a packed agenda, and I will ask for an approval of the agenda as amended. Andrew and Suzanne, all in favor? Okay. All right. I don't see anyone opposed. Thank you. The minutes from April 2021. I know people have seen those minutes before tonight. Are there any additional changes to the minutes? Okay. By consensus, can we approve those minutes? Thank you. All right. So I am going to turn this over at this point to a gentleman I have a great deal of respect for and who has always been a really good friend of the Parks Committee, the Brooklyn Parks Commissioner, Marty Marr.
Hello, folks. It's always a pleasure. Can everybody hear me? I remember to unmute. So it's always a pleasure to work with the Parks Committee of CB2 and with CB2 itself. Thank you all for taking time out from your schedules. We know that parks are important to you, so we'll keep it moving. Chris, if you can pull up the capital status, I'll go through that really quickly, and then we'll do Greene Playground and then Fort Greene, and then we'll continue as ever you like. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes, looks great.
I'm presuming that's okay. Okay, so next slide. So Commodore Barry Park, this is the phase 2, which of course includes the field, the fencing, and that sort of alley as you first come in. We're calling it phase 2 because if you remember about 12 or so years ago, we did the extreme eastern portion. So there's a little more than $10 million in for this. It's adding lighting to the ball field, reconstruction of the field, which is pretty tired, the fencing and that middle alley. Just a precursor to all of this. Basically, COVID delayed everything in our normal 3.5-year process by a year, roughly. So if you recall, the scope meeting was in November. Design started that November with the scope meeting. It was completed. The design is almost complete now. There was some subsurface investigations that we have to do. So we're doing them. And there may be a change in the plan. We were thinking originally to do it in natural turf. We may be doing this in synthetic turf. We don't have all the details on that yet, but I've already talked to the coach and the users about that. So if we continue, excuse me, on the design and pick it back up, we should start to see construction likely in late spring of 22. And typical projects like this are about a year. So that's Commodore Barry. Next slide. And you have a lot of projects going on. So I don't know why this slide is up here because there is no phase 3. It's not funded whatsoever. So this shouldn't be up here at all. I'm not sure why it is. So the comfort station, however, is good news. We do have funding for the comfort station, $3.5 million. And that sort of realigns the way the comfort station is, so it has the maximum amount of facilities to use. That started in April of 2019. It was completed last spring. We're thinking that that is likely to start this coming fall. Building projects tend to take a little bit longer than a year because of all the certifications, but that's good that we'll be able to have a renovated comfort station by spring of 2023 at Commodore Barry. Next slide. So this used to be Bridge Park 2. It's been renamed Susan Smith McKinney Stewart Park. If you recall, this was something ongoing from the Watchtower. There's some review by MTA because there's MTA facilities that are affected by this. So they're in the midst of doing the review. The contract is technically started. The contractor is mobilized and they're on the site, but the hard construction hasn't started. You'll see that happening in the next couple of weeks, and then about a year until completion. Next slide. So Washington Hall, this is renovation of the basketball courts funded by the mayor. 2 new basketball courts and then some bleachers and a little bit of landscaping in the site. Again, originally we were going to be starting this spring, so we'll see. It's not likely to start this spring. It's probably going to be next spring, possibly this coming fall for that project. Next slide. Cadman Plaza, the Brooklyn War Memorial. There is now a lift there. There's some additional work that's happening in the surrounding area. So we believe this will be completed this coming summer. As with anything, you know, there's many needs in the Brooklyn War Memorial, but this is a key critical part in doing the western area and the lift inside. Next slide. So this is the comfort station within the Brooklyn War Memorial. There's some funding from Assemblymember Simon and from the mayor, $1.5 million. That work was a little bit delayed, but we believe we're going to be beginning this fall on renovating the bathrooms within the Brooklyn War Memorial. And again, it's a little more than a year, not quite a year and a half to completion of that in spring of 2023. Next slide. Cadman Plaza, the northern lawn, as folks know, this is between the bridge and the War Memorial itself. It's certainly worn. It has some bad drainage. There's not water service there. So this was funded by the mayor, $6.4 million. New benches, new pavement, new drainage, lighting, and some work to the eastern staircase, which wasn't included in the other design. We believe we will have construction starting this coming fall, and then again, it's about a year project for that. It may take a little bit longer again because of COVID, so that might be spring of next year instead of fall. But the project is moving forward. Next slide. Cadman Plaza East, there's 2 buildings there. This is the building closest to the courts. It's also for renovating the comfort station. Again, the original expectation was for the start of fall of this year. That may still happen this coming fall, and then again, a little more than a year and a half for completion, so that we'll have that comfort station up and operational again. Next slide. Parham Playground. We get some money sometimes from Department of Environmental Protection, and it helps absorb stormwater and bring it directly to plants and drainage. So we have some green infrastructure projects. This is funded by them, where we help collect rainwater and we get new repavement on top of the surface. And it's sub-ground, so we'll have new asphalt and a sport court redone on the multi-purpose play area here. So that's possible this fall, started more likely next spring. And these are not full-length projects. These are about 6-month projects. Next slide is something similar that's happening at Oracle Playground. Same thing, it's designed to capture stormwater, and it's an opportunity for us to get a new pavement job on what we call multi-purpose play area. And the next slide is also similar, I believe, in Classen Playground, the huge asphalt area there. That's going to have some, again, some absorbing stormwater and retention tanks, and then we'll have that repaved So all of those are likely to start spring of 2022, and they're about 6 months in construction. Next slide. Tyler Gore, we had a very nice scope meeting. It's very likely we'll be ready to show you a design next month on this. We just saw a preliminary design that we had comments on now. So this is for complete reconstruction, $5.6 million from Councilmember Cumbo. It's really a tired place, and it could use an uplift. It's over 2 different sets of MTA infrastructure, so that you have to be a little bit careful with design, but there's drainage issues there. I think you're going to be very pleased with the design, and we're hoping to show that to you next month. Next slide. Greene Playground, I'm going to be showing you in a couple of minutes, so we'll skip over that one, but also funded by Councilmember Cumbo. And next slide. I guess that's it. So we will shift over to the presentation on Greene Playground.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting, Commissioner. That's the end. Yeah.
Yes, we're switching over to Greene Playground now to present the design.
Yep.
But that's where it is. So while he's pulling it up, you're very lucky to have elected officials like Majority Leader Cumbo. She's either funded stuff directly or got the mayor or other parties to fund a lot of projects in the district. So you have quite a few things going on. Okay, so this is Greene Playground. It's a $3 million project funded by Majority Leader Cumbo. Next slide. So it's to reconstruct the playground portion and the spray shower for play for all children. It's to create nicer entrances, and the tree pits there are very confined. There's a lot of pavement there, so it's to open them up a little bit. Next slide. So this is where it is in Brooklyn. We always do this as part of our thing. I think everybody knows the site. It's on the corner by the school there. Next slide. This is sort of a site analysis. It's very residential. It is right next to a school, but the preponderance of the area is residential. Next slide. We always look at a 5-minute and a 10-minute to see where other parks are and other recreational facilities. There are a number of parks within walking distance here, but it's very important. The next slide shows that it's within a historic district. Next slide. These are some old drawings. It's 1950s construction, late 50s. So we used to make our own play equipment back then. Next couple of slides just cover over that, what it looked like in the day. The restroom is in the same spot. This is existing conditions. About 20 years ago, there was some requirement contract money. So you can see Washington Avenue there, Greene Avenue. You can see some of the old play equipment and swings, the present location of the flagpole and the comfort station. Next slide. So we just do sort of an analysis to see, what's really needed here. Like I mentioned, there are very confined trees. There's some play equipment. It's not dangerous, but it's sort of aged quite a bit. Spray showers and so on. It definitely has old benches. So we're looking to give this a complete upgrade and a complete reconstruction. Next slide. Same thing, we do a tree inventory here. There's there's 3 trees affected. One is a design removal by the building there, and then there's 2 stumps that are being removed as part of this project. Some additional trees will be planted in the project. Next slide. So here's some existing pictures. Next slide. These are just the conditions. You can see that stump and the high fences. Next slide. You can see the aging of the play equipment. There's also spacing in the safety surface. Next slide. The flagpole is just a little rusted. With the comfort station, we're going to be bringing the grade of the ground directly up to the comfort station entrances, so you won't need these sort of makeshift ramps that are there. Next slide. The drinking fountain is no longer accessible, so we'll be replacing that. And then there's just beyond in the MPPA, there's a sinkhole. We're able to include just that sinkhole of the asphalt area that's adjacent. We don't have the funding to do the entire thing, but we will repair that sinkhole. Next slide. So these are really, really old benches. These are called vandal resistant. We also call them ugly. And we have some old game tables and stuff on the outside. Next slide. And then this is just sort of a concept plan where we organize play. We organize it. Younger children are in the 2 to 5 group. Older kids are in the 5 to 12 group. We always like to try to have water play and some other games and sort of family gathering areas. So we have sort of thought that out, and then the flow through the park. Next slide. So this shows the new plan for it. We are able, swings are very popular, but they take up a lot of real estate. So they were really able to keep swings in here. You see on the right are swings for older children. On the left for younger children. There is a water play area. Water play in the old days was a big wrench that the parkie had to come out. Now it's activated. It not only makes it funner for kids to use, it also conserves the water. We're putting a new flagpole in over in the seated area. If you look at the dot with the circle around it, that's a brand new flagpole. And then there's, in that seating area, there's also play that's paved into the ground for all kinds of play for kids. And then we have these nice new play equipment units, big units that we'll show you in a little bit for 2 to 5 and for 5 to 12. Outside, there'll be a city bike station, some areas to sit, and so also some areas for bicycle racks. Next slide. So here's a zoom in of that play area, sitting area. Some of we have the rodent resistant trash barrels that we like, some of the paved games that we're using, some of the gathering tables and also spaces for wheelchair accessibility, some of the different treatments, and then the World's Fair bench from 1939, sort of a classic bench for this area. Next slide. Again, a close-up of the water spray. There's different, they call them jellies, but there's different ground sprays, water domes, and stuff. What's good about this is when it's hot in the summer, the kids can have a lot of fun, but it also becomes a run-around area the other 9 months or so out of the year. Next slide. Again, here you can see sort of a layout. We're keeping the concrete aardvark amazingly. We show some of the large planted areas for the trees. So instead of being in tight pits, that's a little bit more planted and expanded for the health of the tree and also for water, stormwater absorption. Plenty of benches scattered around for caregivers to look, and then some shadow play panels. Next slide. So one of the so you have play equipment looking in different views, and we try to have some earth tone colors being in a historic district, but still fun. And what we tried to do, because it's a confined space, you'll see on the next slide, we tried to build up a little bit in the play equipment because you have to have certain clearance zones around it. So when you can't build out, you can build up. So there's some real fun adventures here for the older kids as well. Next slide. And you see that this is the fencing diagram for that. You have to have fencing around swing areas and certain play equipment. Next slide. And the different surfaces that we have within the park, pretty standard to parks. Next slide. And then these are some of the features. The building will have an accessible drinking fountain. We'll also have the high-low drinking fountain. Again, we talked about some of the seating. There's that new flagpole and some of the fencing to protect the landscaping as well. Again, standard furnishings in a rebuilt park. Next slide. These are some of the trees and landscaping that will be done, enough to bring in some nice color as much of the year as possible. Next slide. And then, so we always like to do a comparison of the permeability. We've managed to double it here. There's some opportunities, but not as many as we'd like in a sort of fixed space. So while keeping a lot of the play value, we've been able to double the permeability of the site. Next slide. And then that's the schematic plan that we see again. And I think that's the last slide for this. All right.
That's correct. That's the last one.
Okay. So if we can hop over to Fort Greene. Okay. So Fort Greene Park, just go back to the first slide. So what we're presenting for approval is this addition to the previous scope, but I do want to review everything that's going on in the park. So next slide. So the addition, of course, somebody's playing a loud radio outside my office. I'm sorry about that. So the budget for this phase of the park is an additional $3.75 million that's added on to the other funds. So in total, it becomes a $24 million project, and it adds some acreage. I'll explain that in just a minute. So it's really existing paths and paths that were historically there that we're going to reintroduce into the park. Next slide. So I think everybody knows where Fort Greene Park is. Next slide. And it's in a historic district. Next slide. And it's in a largely residential sort of mixed use area. Next slide. Okay, so I just want to remind people of the previous projects that were going on. Next slide, please. So to start with, we had what we called phase one, starting at the Willoughby entrance. You'll see the cursor there now. That was finished about 7 years ago. And it did the drainage, if everybody remembered, the park used to wash out onto Willoughby Avenue. And then that loop of paths all the way up to the visitor center and around, that was all done. So then we went to phase two. 2B is at the bottom below where phase one was. That's where Lake Fort Greene is. So we wanted to correct the drainage there. The preponderance of phase two is 2A. So there's a couple of things in it. It starts at the corner of Washington Park and Myrtle, that oval where the Christmas tree and a lot of the art displays are. That's going to be made wheelchair accessible. All of the paths inward of that are going to be redone along with the landscaping with them. The two landings of the grand staircase, not the staircase itself, but the two landings in the center of the picture are being done on the grand staircase. We'll wait for the cursor to catch up with that. And then we're also doing this path that previously existed. We're reintroducing that from the Myrtle Avenue path up onto that. And then that other entrance from Myrtle Avenue will also be done. Let's move on to the next slide, because I think it's everything I just said. Yeah, sorry, I forgot there was a close-up of that. Next slide. So this again is Lake Fort Greene and the conditions of some of the paths in there. Next slide. Okay, so then there was the part with the Parks Without Borders, and there's a number of features we're doing here. All of the sidewalk along Myrtle Avenue, all of the sidewalk along St. Edmunds on the left side there, the two staircases by Willoughby Street, and again down at the Calv that are next to the hospital, and then the picnic area, the fitness area, and the central plaza. We'll zoom in on those right now. Next slide. So this is the basic treatment of the sidewalk. It's classic and historic. It's from the wall to the curb, complete reconstruction. So there's this is a very classic Olmsted and Vaux. There's a 10-inch verge with Belgian block, what you would call cobblestone on the inside, then replacing the walkway itself in the hex pavers. And again, they're all flat and wheelchair accessible. And then from there to the curb, there's the Belgian block or cobblestones again. So that's sort of continuous, and it's the same thing you see on places that we've already done. Next slide. So then we focus in on this area. The path that cuts diagonally across from the upper right to the left is really one. It's a main thoroughfare for folks. So we're completely repaving that path, adding lighting. You see the little dots there, new lighting with modern technology, so it'll become much brighter at night. The fitness area, we're expanding the size of the fitness area threefold, so it'll be 3 times bigger, very popular. We're reconstructing the basketball court. We wanted to make it bigger, but you can't because there's some DEP infrastructure underneath, but we are adding some bleachers to the left-hand side of that as well. We're tripling the size of the barbecue area, all the way from the street up at the top, all the way down to the wall and next to the plaza. We're also adding this path that cuts across so the picnic area becomes wheelchair accessible. There'll be both permanent and movable tables. There'll be grills in there, and there'll also be proper ash disposal units. The picnic area the barbecue area is hugely popular with everybody, so that's going to be tripled in size. And then we'll go to the plaza in the next slide. So the plaza starts from the base of the grand staircase. It's been a plaza since the 1908, and then before that it was a plaza in a different form. So what we're doing here is repavement. The pavement there is terrible. If you go to the seating on the outside, we're doing sort of more intimate seating along the grass that's there. And then we're expanding where there's the beautiful array of London plane trees. So we're making that in a planted area that's wider along there. And then inside the plaza, there's some more intimate seating with benches for sort of people watching. And we'll zoom into we're sort of repeating that strategy in the circular area. We'll see that in the next slide. So there again, we have 4 quadrants. We're expanding the planted area around the trees. Again, new lighting, new benches. On the outside of the circle are sort of cafe tables, more intimate seating. Inside is a series of benches appropriate to the era for sort of people watching. And then we're opening up from the corner the view shed with that plaza and stairs to the right and left of that, flanking it. We're making it wheelchair accessible. So on the right, there's a wheelchair path. On the left, there's a wheelchair path. And then the trees in the corner are going to be replaced with some ornamental trees as well. In full disclosure, it's no secret that in this project, 83 trees are being removed, 32 of a condition that are dead or dying, 51 are designed removals, but of those 51, half of them are Norway maples that are up towards the corner. Norway maples are illegal in some countries now. They were planted in the 70s, very, very close together. When we started this project numerous years ago, they were estimated to have a 5 to 10 year lifespan. Some of them are even more in decline than they were. So they are in fact being removed in this. We are preserving all of the London plains in the LA, which is great news. But it's also important to realize that 200 new trees are being planted. And in Fort Greene Park, that sort of ensures the forest for the many, many decades to come. I know a lot of people have different opinions on this, but again, we have forestry and the landscape architects that work very hard to try to establish what the original intent was here. So that is happening with the previously existing projects. Next slide. So the west landscape, what we did, we have to do for the entire project, we have to do a environmental assessment statement. And that's going to happen. It's atypical for us to do an environmental assessment statement for the projects we just looked at that have been approved already. So what we're doing is we're adding funds and adding landscape for it to become a larger project that we would typically do an environmental assessment statement. So all that means is that a consultant gets hired for all phases of the project. There's some very standardized rules that they have to follow, and they look at the work and they see whether there's an impact or not. It's sort of the least level of environmental review. They give us the results of that. We have to publish that and make a statement to the community board, to the borough president, and to the mayor's office. So a secret determination gets made. If whatever the recommendation is accepted, it goes forward. If there is an impact, we may have to go further to do an environmental assessment study, which would add another year onto the design. Based on a lot of people's experience, we don't think we're going to get to that level, but we'll wait and see. But the environmental statement is not for just for the parts that I showed you, but for the part coming as well. So I just wanted to make sure we covered all of that ground. So now, next slide. So what we're adding onto it is really, it's very much replacement in kind. We're adding to the acreage. We're doing things that needed to get done anyway. So it's mostly path work, existing paths that are in terrible condition. Obviously, when we're doing the paths, we're going to do drainage because there's no picnic in Fort Greene drainage-wise. We're reintroducing a path that was a historic path roughly in the same spot. It's become what we call a desire line, where people walk this anyway, it wears the grass away and so on. So we're doing that, that's that dotted line goes up. And then since we're getting up, we don't have the funds to do both wings of the Monument Plaza, I wish we did, but we don't. And again, this isn't gonna solve all the problems at Fort Greene. There's many other things that need to be done. But what we are able to do is do that little loop from the West Plaza to the Monument Plaza. And that makes the Monument Plaza accessible from the western side. From the eastern side, it already is accessible, but from the western side, it's not. So we're using these sort of gentle slopes to get folks up to that area. So next slide. So you can see some of the paths. This is sort of no-brainer stuff. They're not in good condition. You could really see the erosion too that exists here. So this is to correct and check that erosion. Next slide. You can actually see that fenced-in area is that desire line path that goes up to the Western Plaza. So that will be reestablished in the McKim-Mead and White, the McKim-Mead and White plan, there actually was a path there. So that'll be reestablished. Next slide. Again, you can see the old benches, you can see the bike racks, you can see some of the erosion and the path conditions. So we'll be reestablishing the paths in virtually the same spot. Next slide. Again, the condition of the paths, that's that plaza. Again, the plaza is not part of this, but it will make the connection so that we can get up to the Monument Plaza. Next slide. And here this is sort of a good visual. The parts that are in yellow are replacement in kind of existing paths. The one that's in orange is following those existing desire lines that get people up to the Monument Plaza at a sort of gentle slope and then gets you a wheelchair up to the Monument Plaza itself. Next slide. I think that might be it. So this just shows the grading and the contours. So again, we're trying to address erosion and drainage in this as well. So you can see the different contours in there. Next slide. There are 4 trees that are in poor condition that are being removed in this project. We are planting at least 20 new trees, but these 4 trees are dead or dying, so they'll be removed. Next slide. And again, this just shows you sort of the way the drainage works and how we use curb technology to guide the water to appropriate spots. You can see a little cutout on the left-hand side of how we use gravel and subsurface conditions to help draw the water so it's not puddling or ponding. You see a better detail in that in the next slide. No, it's the slide after this. This just shows you where some lighting is going to be done, some benches are going to be done, and the curbs. Next slide. This shows you a little bit of the, we're also connecting to sewage, but what we always try to do is use green infrastructure so the sewer system that's already overwhelmed doesn't become further overwhelmed. So we have created these swales, these subsurface gravel conditions, these dry wells, so that after a heavy rainstorm, the water seeps into the ground quickly, so there's no puddling, but then it dissipates into the landscape to feed the grass, to feed the trees, to feed the shrubs, and it takes advantage of the slopes, so we don't have big outwashes of soil and things like that at the bottom of slopes. So that's some of the, and this was very successful in that first phase that used to wash out to Willoughby Street. We use the same basic technology here. Next slide. These are, again, just some of the features that we're going to be using. The settee bench is sort of our historic bench. You can see how we've done wheelchair accessibility at some of the other entrances that we're doing here. The light poles and the drinking fountain also match sort of a McKim medium white, almost at a box design, the block edging, and so on. In places where a handrail is necessary to make sure there's a handrail, just to give folks a little bit of hand on some of the slopes. I think that might be it. Next slide. Sorry, yes, of course, trees and shrubs and landscaping. So again, we have a variety of trees. We do that much more nowadays. We don't do a single species because if there's an infection to one, they all go. So we like to have multiple species. It also brings some color to the park, and we do the same thing with our shrubs. Next slide. And again, this shows the area that we're adding on. So we have the approvals for the other parts already in terms of the community board. This is the addition that we're seeking the Parks Committee and Community Board 2 to endorse. The project will happen. All 3 phases will be in one contract. We did promise the community that we would phase that somehow to allow the maximum access from Myrtle Avenue into the park. And we're going to keep that promise in the contract. So even though it's one contract, we'll be working in one area while you can get in another area, then flip-flop, so to speak, so that we can maintain at least access to the park from the Myrtle Avenue side to whatever extent is practical. So that's also going to be happening. And the EAS, the environmental assessment statement, and the consultant will be looking at the park as a whole, all 3 of these phases in that statement. But this is the part that we're adding on for your review. And that's all I have.
Well, thank you, Marty. That was quite a presentation. I have before we ask other questions, it's my understanding that you're looking for support on 2 issues tonight. Or is it just the Fort Greene, or is it the Greene Playground as well?
Yeah, yes, we'd like your approval for Greene Playground, and we'd like your approval for the 3rd phase of Fort Greene. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
4th phase of Fort Greene.
And then, as you know, we had submitted some questions, and I don't
Yes,
know.
I'm ready to
Should we-
answer them now.
Should we go to those questions?
Sure, whatever you like.
Okay.
We're here for you.
All right.
I have them in front of me, so if you want me to just run through them, I could do that too.
Yeah, that would be great. We also have an additional question.
I'm always ready for that as well. So question 1 was the
Okay.
capital status. I think we covered that, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So question 2, the Parks reps for Community Board 2, who's the best person to add to our regular invites? Much as I love Community Board 2 and would love to meet you virtually and in person at all your meetings, the other community boards would be jealous. But we have a very competent manager. Andrea Keys is our park manager. It's andrea.keys@parks.nyc.gov. Her phone number is 917-618-4422. She's been in parks just about as long as I am. She's very experienced, very skilled. She's one of our better managers. Andrea, are you here? Can you hear me talking good about you? Please someone tell her I talk nice about her. So. And then Denise Palmer is the regional manager. She has a series of districts, and we can give you this stuff all online as well, too. So that's the best person.
So
Summer staffing.
could we have one of those people at each meeting?
If you
This
talk
was
nice
my
to them,
question.
if you
Okay.
talk nice to them and invite them, yeah, they're available
Okay.
to go for sure.
Great.
For sure.
Thank you.
Summer staffing and park maintenance ahead of what is likely to be another busy summer for park. I've been here 38 years. They're all busy summers, but I know what you mean. Will there be adequate staff in place to keep parks clean? Any signage asking about people to take trash with them? So last year was quite a challenge for all of us. All of a sudden we were in the pandemic and we sort of hit a fiscal crisis at the same time. So we didn't have the normal seasonal help, and our park experience opportunity program workers were at a low. So we were struggling, and where else are people going to go when they're confined to their house? Of course, they're going to go to parks. I am so proud of the Brooklyn team for the work they did last year. It was very, very tough to maintain the parks to the best we can without any new resources. We didn't get any summer staff whatsoever. And, we might not had it clean by 10 a.m. on a Monday, but we certainly did by later in the day. And I'm really proud of the work they did. The good news is we are getting seasonal staff this year. So we are fully gearing up for a full season with all the pools open, with the beaches open. We don't have to take down hoops or anything like that. Do you know how difficult that is for a park veteran all these years to have to take down basketball hoops and then put them back up afterwards? Anyway, we won't be closing any playgrounds. We're starting to see, as everyone else is, as the vaccine, the availability happens, that things are starting to open up. We've gone from events from 50 to 200. It just went to 500 with some conditions. So we're still monitoring events very closely. We're not doing amplified sound as such just yet. Performances are still small, but we're seeing that it's starting to open up, and then we have meetings on this weekly. So yes, we will have the staff to keep the parks clean. We're not asking people to take their garbage home with them, mostly because it's New York and it's Brooklyn. No one's going to listen. But we do have, trash receptacles. We are doing a litter program and sort of advertising for people to get your garbage to the trash. We do want volunteers as always. Particularly Fort Greene, Dave Barker could always use help cleaning up, or Andrea could use help in any of the parks. So if you want to volunteer, by all means, we're happy to do that. But we won't be asking people to do take in, take out. Not at this phase. In Prospect Park, they're piloting that, and so far it's been successful. We launched sort of an anti-litter campaign just to make people think a little bit more, and we have corrals and we've had signage, and it's been on a lot of the media to try to help out and do your part and not litter. But we will have staff, and we appreciate anybody that helps out. Playground signage and no dogs in playgrounds and so on. So a very large study was done of signage in the city probably about 5 years ago, and there were recommendations from that. And we're in the 4th year of universal signage throughout parks. So, for example, we used to have signs that said closing time was dusk. What's dusk? It could be this time, it could be that time. It's open to interpretation. There's only 3 closing times. All playgrounds close at 9. All parks close at either 1 a.m. or 10 p.m. Usually the 10 p.m. is a request of us or of the police for some special reason. And so all of the park rules are different. Whether you're in a playground, there's rules. Whether you're on a ball field, there's rules. When you go in a park, so every time the rules transition, there's supposed to be a new sign. So if you're in a playground, dogs aren't allowed whatsoever. They're not allowed on ball fields. They're not allowed in gardens. Whether they're on the leash or off the leash, they're just not allowed. It says that on the sign quite clearly. If there's a specific issue, let Andrea know. You can always email me. The police aren't dealing with these kind of quality of life stuff anymore. We have a handful of park enforcement officers. We'll do what they call targeted enforcement. So if you see, I'm making it up, in Playground X, that on Saturdays between 9 and 11, people are letting dogs in, we'll try to first warn people nicely, and then we'll ticket them and make sure they're changing their behavior to some extent. If there's a persistent problem, there are a couple of, you can't say no dogs anymore, it's no pets is the legal language. So on a case-by-case basis, we can put in a request for them. We know that the signage is tiny, but that's what this study recommended. It's universal. It's not just our park system. It's at a lot of places across the world. It's sort of the new way to do parks. So that's about the signage system. But if there's a specific problem, let us know. And there's a signage committee, so you can't just make up your own signs. It has to be something standard and defensible in court and so on. So there's another question about signs, about why a park is named something. So that we definitely do have. We've had it since back in the Henry Stern days. We have historic signs that describe when the park became a park, why it's named whatever it is, and so on. As part of that sign replacement program, we're also doing replacing the historic signs. So if there's a historic sign that that you don't see in a park, let us know. We'll see if it's just upgrading the text and getting it done. We don't manufacture this stuff in-house anymore. It's all done by contract, so it takes a little bit of time to do, but we're happy to do that. If there was never a historic sign and you know the history of a park, send us that stuff and we'll get one made up. Your next question is about Commodore Barry Park. I did promise when the project was over, we would have a second historic sign, so that it's a big park, I get it. So that's still a promise. When we finish this phase of construction, there'll be a second sign there. You asked about the status of it. We went through that earlier. So I think that's done on that. Let me just take a sip of water. I know that you'll be talking to our sister agency, EDC, about Abolitionist Place. So just our 2 cents on this. The term park does have implications in it. Many people think of park as parkland. Parkland is sacred. It can't be traded. It takes an act of state legislation and so on. So to try to remove it. Parkland is sort of forever, and it implies that we're maintaining it. We don't have any capacity to take on new places. There are state parks and there are national parks in New York City that are not in our jurisdiction. But I will allow EDC will talk to you more on that. But it does have certain implications, the name park, in my experience anyway. Cadman Plaza we talked about earlier. Susan Smith McKinney Park, formerly Bridge Park, we talked about earlier. 69 Adams, the ULURP and Dumbo deal agreed. So we've been talking to DOT while they've been doing work. We actually had a meeting. Some of that property we had used for vehicle and equipment storage, which is our intention. There is also, apparently there was a competition on the design of it, and the designers reached out to me and they have this sort of reforestation concept in mind. And we're talking to them and working with them. They don't have funds for construction. The project isn't funded for construction. We're always willing to talk. Listen, we like trees, we like landscaping. So we're always willing to talk about people in public use. There was a concept to connect Cadman to Brooklyn Bridge Park via that route. We're certainly open to that, but we definitely have a need, particularly along Washington Street, for vehicle and equipment storage. And we're going to be making sure we have that as well. So that's all the written question I had. You said you had another one?
Right, there's one more question from the committee, and thank you
Sure.
again for all those, for speaking this whole time. This has to do with University Place and a request for a dog run. It's the area across from City Point and in front of LIU.
Yeah. So
And it's being used by dog owners now as a dog park, so to speak. And are there any plans to turn this area into a dog run?
no, there aren't. So I've been here a long time, as I mentioned. So dog runs didn't exist like 25 years ago. It's been evolving, and parks have been evolving with it. I always explain to people you need 4 things for a dog run. The first thing you need is an organized group that's going to maintain it and sort of police it. There are rules that you have to have in a dog run. There are things that need to get picked up. So that maintenance has to go to a group. We'll do like the water service maintenance, and if the fence gets damaged, we'll do that kind of stuff. But there has to be a group that's going to do it. The second thing you need is an appropriate location for it. That Parks agrees is an appropriate location. So not every place can have a dog run. Not every place is big enough for a dog run. We don't like to take away from other programs or other activities, whether it's a sitting area or a playground or whatever. And also, people think of trees as being good because dogs like trees. A place that has trees is typically not a good place for a dog run. We don't do makeshift dog runs where we just put wood chips down and put a fence up. There's actually some engineering involved. The nature of a dog run involves excavation, sewer lines, and a base level of gravel for liquid to drain out when it rains, and have hoses and stuff. And then there's the top surface. Years ago, it was stone dust, pea gravel. Pea gravel is great for drainage, but it gets stuck in between floors. Then they went to crushed granite. Crushed granite's very dusty, so you have dust when it's very dry, and it can kind of pack quite a bit, so it's not always good drainage. Now they have this synthetic turf that's like good for dogs, that drains through. So that's the latest technology on it. Then you need the overwhelming support of the community board and community. So not just CB2 saying yes, but if like people that are living across the street or whatever also support it, because we want to make sure we're being judicious. The final thing, and don't ask me to explain why, but it's the reality of construction in New York City. You need the funding to build it, because we won't do it as a makeshift thing. It needs to be a capital project. The last dog run we got an estimate for was $1.1 million, and it takes that whole 3.5, 4 years of capital time to construct, because you are excavating, you're putting up fences. There's a doggy vestibule, so that when the door opens, the dogs don't run out. You go into the vestibule. There's the big dog drinking fountain. There's the little dog drinking fountain. There's the human drinking fountain. There's the bench, and so on. So, and I'm not making these prices up. These are based on real construction and real bids that we're getting. As far as appropriateness, I don't know that, I know there's a desire for a dog run, and I'm certainly open to discussion of that. I don't know that University Place right off of Flatbush Avenue is the ideal spot. There are some other parks that are not in great use, but some are by the BQE. So we sort of have to wait and see what happens with the BQE project. But I'm always open to discussing, and you're not going to do it in historic places and things like that. Not every park can have a dog run, but I'm always willing to listen to ideas and discuss it further.
Okay, well, thank you again for all of that. I thought maybe one good way to start this is to talk about the Greene playground and see if people, first committee members, have questions about the Greene playground, and then we could hear from others and then take a vote on whether the committee wants to support the Greene playground design that you have shown us this evening. So
Sure.
committee members, Suzanne, and yes, please, thank you for raising your hand, Suzanne. I'm not going to recognize anybody who calls out. You either need to raise your hand or some way, do not go out. We're not going to listen to any questions from people who call out. Suzanne, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Commissioner Marr. So Greene Playground, and I was at the community envisioning. So thank you for sharing that back. And the first thing I think that's positive is it looks like all of the design will be in green. I remember people saying the playground is red and it's green playground. It should be green. So I thought that was definitely positive, as well as other aspects to keeping the aardvark sculpture, incorporating the water feature, of course. My two questions from things that I remember hearing: picnic tables, or tables, and I saw the tables there. Am I right in it was fast and a lot to absorb? It looked like there's a lot of background noise. Yes, do you hear that?
There is.
Would everybody please mute if you're not speaking? Thank you.
Thank you. I think currently in the park, what I learned was there's one picnic table, and there was a desire to have more, especially in a playground where people might want to have kids' birthday parties, etc. It looked like maybe there's one adult table and one kid table. I don't know if there was more. So that's my question for you. And if it's not more, is there an opportunity to add a little bit more tables there?
So there are several tables that they're sort of more like cafe tables, but you can use them for picnics. There are two over just off of the play area itself. There's also in that area where the paved games were, there's another two over there. And then outside the park, there are some game tables like chess and checker type of tables for adults to be, because they're not really supposed to be inside the park doing stuff like that. So we do have tables in the park. And then, you know, if the demand becomes even more, I have the ability to add picnic tables, you know, by a phone call. So
Oh, great. That's good
I
for
think
the
that,
community to know.
yeah,
Yeah.
the design has fixed ones, and they're in kids locations specifically for the purpose of, you know, when people have parties or whatever. If it becomes popular and there's safety room, I can always add a picnic
Yeah.
table.
So it sounds like maybe it's going from one seating area inside the park to two is what I heard, which is positive.
And the design team, if you're on with me, chime in if I'm saying something incorrect.
59 Discovery, your tenant bill.
Again, please
That's
mute
not-
if you're not speaking.
That's not
We're hearing
us.
someone's radio.
Does that
or
answer your
something.
question?
No, I have. And then my other question was about, there were people that liked the garden that's there and talked about PS11 really utilizing a garden that was there. So was there any aspect of that incorporated?
So yes, when we expand tree pits to be planted areas, those are de facto gardens. When I say garden, I'm not talking about tomatoes and zucchini. I'm talking about, you know, flowering shrubs and stuff like that. We love to work with school groups and volunteers to do that. We put in sort of the basic planting, but we like them to take small bites. So one of the most rewarding things in the world is when in the fall you get students to plant daffodil and tulip bulbs, because in the spring when the weather starts getting nice, you see the flowering daffodils first and then tulips afterwards, and it's a great feeling. We find that schools have big eyes, but not necessarily the appetite to see through all the weeding and all of that stuff. So we like to keep projects like that small, but we love working with schools on that kind of stuff, learning the responsibility about garden care and doing school projects. And there's definitely room in the project to do that. Yes.
Wonderful. I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you. And I do have a follow-up question with regards to the
Suzanne,
I'll hold that.
Suzanne, I think we should let someone else ask a
Absolutely.
question. Andrew, thank you. Andrew, you had your hand up?
You're muted, Andrew.
You hear me now?
Yes.
I just know that on the west side, with the Greene playground, you completely remain silent about the concrete area where the basketball courts are. Is there
Yes.
that's going to be addressed sometime sooner than later?
No, it's not going to be addressed at all. It's not funded.
Go ahead.
As you know, after all of our years together, I never get to pick a project. We're doing this next and that next in 38 years. It's whatever's funded. That's a completely different phase of the park. The basketball courts, the asphalt NPPA. It's not funded. If we get funded now, it'll be done in 4 years. We would have a scope meeting. We would listen to community input and so on. That's not funded. There happens to be a sinkhole right next to the gate that we are addressing this, but the basketball courts, the fencing, the drainage, all of that over there is not at all part of this project.
Thank you.
And if I had to hazard a guess, you'd be looking at another $3.5 million. I mean, you don't have to have it all as asphalt. It could be synthetic turf. It could have a skate area. It could have full court basketball. There's so many possibilities. It would really have, an estimate would have to depend on what we sort of dream together. But you're talking about a completely separate project.
I wanted to address that is later on at some point in time, could we do that dreaming together?
We've certainly done that on the driving tour we had a couple of years ago, but I'm always up for a good dreaming tour, and send your ideas into us. We're always happy to look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other committee members with questions?
Yeah.
Oh, sure, Lenny, go ahead.
Yeah, getting back to that idea about a university,
No, we're only
Plaza.
talking about Fort Greene. I mean,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry, Greene Playground, just Greene Playground
sorry.
for now.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we're taking one thing at a time. Do any board members have questions about Greene Playground? Okay. Do any members of the public have questions about Greene Playground? Taya, do you have anybody who's asked to speak, to ask a question?
Chair Zoller-Gringer, I believe the list of folks so far are wanting to ask questions specifically about Fort Greene Park. If that's incorrect, you could message or speak up now. This is for
All right,
questions
so-
specifically about Greene Playground.
Playground. All right. I don't see any other questions. So I will ask if there's a motion Andrew, do you want to state your motion in relation to Greene Playground?
We support the design of the playground for the Greene Playground
As presented tonight.
presented tonight.
Okay, do I have a second? Dwight, thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Please raise your hand. Carolyn, have you joined the meeting? I'm sorry. Do we
Ms.
have six-
Kamananwiri is here. She's just muted. Here she comes.
Right.
I'm here. I've been here.
Yes, I know that. I'm sorry.
I was muted.
We do have our seventh member. And I apologize. My mind is I have a blank as to her name. So, but I see her. I apologize. I'm doing 6 things at once. All right. So, all in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Now, I thought we would go back to the capital plan that you discussed first, and see if there are any questions on that, and then we will focus on Fort Greene. So are there any questions from committee members about the presentation on pending capital projects? Candace, I'm sorry, my mind went blank. I apologize. Thank you for being here. Any committee members with questions? Oh, Dwight, you have a question.
Well,
Not about Fort Greene, not about Fort Greene Park. Anything but Fort Greene Park.
Green Park.
Right.
No.
This is going back to the capital. Okay. And any board members have, oh, go ahead, Dwight. You have a question?
Well, no, I'm sorry. I'm mixing presentations up.
Okay. All right. The capital budget update was pretty comprehensive. I know personally, I'm sorry that things aren't as expeditiously moving forward as some would like. But I understand. So now we go to any board members have questions about the capital budget presentation. Okay, or any members of the public on questions about the capital budget presentation that do not focus on Fort Greene Park,
Yes,
which we will
Chair
get to in a
Zoller-Gringer,
moment.
we have a couple questions about capital projects not related to Fort Greene Park. The first one I think on the list is Ali Santana.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Hello.
Good, welcome.
Hey, so yeah, I have a question. First of all, my name is Ali Santana. I am a Fort Greene resident, born and raised in Brooklyn in the Clinton Hill, Fort Greene area. So I grew up in these parks. I have a question and a comment regarding South Oxford Park. I live on South Oxford Street, and the park has been like a blessing, especially during quarantine. And I have a young son, and we noticed that when we're out there, the turf has really been degrading. I believe the park was like built 15 years ago, and the artificial turf is now like crumbling. It's made out of this crumb rubber and these artificial blades. And we're noticing like every time my son plays, he comes back with turf in his hair. We're finding turf in the bed all around the house, and we're really concerned that it's becoming an environmental issue. I've read different reports about how the turf is actually very toxic because it's made out of recycled rubber and such, and we're just wondering if there was any plan to replace that turf in South Oxford Park. The research that I've done says that artificial turf usually needs to be like replaced every 8 to 10 years, and it's been about 15 years. I also just have some pictures that I took of the park. Hold on one second, let me show you. So this is like the crumb rubber that is just everywhere all over the park, which is like a manhole.
Mr. Santana, I'm actually going to pass presenter privileges to you. 1 second. Okay, you should be able to share screen now.
Okay. Can you see the image that I'm showing?
It's very small. I'm not sure if you can see it.
Okay. Cool. You may have to full screen me. I'm using a different device, so.
That's okay. Feel free to drop a link in the chat if there's a website.
Okay, I'll do that. I mean, in the meantime, if you can see, I'm just going to show you. This is a football here that is covered in the artificial turf. So this these artificial blades of grass stick to everything, especially certain materials, and we're finding it everywhere in our shoes, and we're just worried about like inhaling it since it's so lightweight as well. This is my son in the park. You can see like the tire marks from somebody who was riding a bike, just because like anytime anything touches that turf, you can definitely see where it was. And so the other concern, this is like a picture of children playing. There's like little babies who are always on the turf, and they're probably getting the stuff in their mouth and in their bodies as well. And it would just be terrible if this became an environmental issue years down the line because this wasn't addressed. And this is just a photo of like shoes that are always full of this stuff every time we come home. There's just little green specks and black rubber that gets all over the place. So yeah, I just wanted to know if there was any plan to replace that artificial turf in the park. Maybe with something that's more eco-friendly, something that's more that's safer. But yeah.
So thank you, Ali. Nice meeting you. Ali, what I'm going to ask my staff if they'll get your contact info, and we'll find out and get back to the community board and to you. So there's not a full capital project that's funded for this park, but we do synthetic turf broad contracts citywide, and we sort of rotate amongst them because it's about 15 years that most of them are getting redone. We will check to see if this is on a list, where it is on the list. If it's not on any list to be done, we'll make sure it's on our capital needs list so that we can ask elected officials to fund it. But it may already be on a list for replacement because it is towards the end of its lifespan. We did a very thorough test, maybe I'm going to say 8 years or so, to make sure that there wasn't any harmful ingredients in the crumb rubber. There were many iterations of the crumb rubber, and the time that South Oxford was done, I was here then, it was not recycled tires, which was the big concern very early on in synthetic turf. But anyway, I'll ask Chris, could we just get Ali's information, and let's look into the citywide turf projects, see if South Oxford is on there. If it isn't, let's get it on there, but let's also get it on our capital needs list. Either way, let's in a week's time, Ali, is that okay? To get back to you and to the community board.
Sure. And thank you.
I just have a follow-up question to that. When they do replacements on that turf, are they using the same type of material as that's there now?
No. So that what's good about synthetic turf is the sub-drainage structure doesn't have to be replaced. So underneath the turf, there's a gravel base and there's some drainage bases and stuff. What has to get replaced is the top level. So it's not as expensive as reconstructing the whole thing. There are a couple of different types of synthetic turf. I'm actually surprised that this is what they call infill. What they use now for infill is silicone coated sand. And what they do that for is, for when you're playing soccer and rough rectangular sports. For a small sort of kiddie soccer community field like that, it's atypical to use the crumb rubber or the silicone coated sand. What they would do, there's a carpet type, but I leave that decision to engineers and designers that know what the appropriate material is to replace it. But like I said, we'll check on a list. Both are completely safe and so on, but we will check to see if it's on a list and advocate for it being done.
Thank you. Taya?
Mr. Dwayne Broadnax is next with questions about other issues other than Fort Greene Park.
Yes, hi, good evening, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. I just want to piggyback on what Mr. Santana spoke about with South Oxford Park. I am the president of Friends of South Oxford Park.
We know you well, Greene, and thank you for all you've done over the years.
Oh man, cool, thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be a part of it. So we've had other people sort of concerned about the turf. We had some damage to the turf a couple of years ago where someone went in there with a motorcycle or something and it ripped a big patch of the turf up. And my co-chair and I, we were able to put it back down. But we've been trying to get that repaired, and we've been trying to get the turf just maintained with just, with cleaning. Mr. Santana actually brought to my attention the duration of a turf's life. So we're now, in accord with him in advocating to either get the turf replaced or modified or whatever has to be done, because it has been used quite thoroughly. So I concur. We need to really address that, especially if there's a different material or different apparatus that can be used now, because those little pieces of turf, they follow you all day. They're all in your house and your clothes and everything. So we're hopeful to get that addressed. And also, I mean, we all know that South Oxford Park has no comfort station, and we know that that's a capital project. But Marty, as you may have seen the email I sent you recently, we're hoping that we can get some type of even portable portable potty in there for this summer, because the park is so greatly used, but there's nowhere for children or people to go. So we're hoping that we can somehow get.
So, Dwayne, there's two things we'll do. One is that I'll have one of our turf specialists. Can somebody mute this, because I'm echoing, I think. We'll get one of our turf specialists to look and see if there's a repair necessary. There's also a machine that sort of fluffs up the compacted infill. So we'll see if that's needed or not. But I'll get one of our turf specialists. Chris, can you just take that down, speak to Jamie, and have him talk to me about that? Dwayne, I don't have the ability myself to rent a Porto Sand, but if the community group would like to do that and sort of help make sure it gets locked at night, because bad things can happen in Porto Sands, I'm willing to allow that to happen. And we can talk about that offline. Happy to discuss that. You can call me, Denise, or Andrea, and we can figure out something for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Chair Zoller-Gringer, there's another question about synthetic turf. If you would like to take another question, or perhaps this topic has been covered.
Well, I would prefer to go on to another subject, unless it's from a different park, if it's not in South Oxford Park.
Ms. Coteen, is your question regarding South Oxford Park?
No, it's a general question about synthetic turf. As you know, there's been many studies showing that it's a toxic material because it's a microplastic that leaches into the earth and onto people's clothes and then through the wash into the water supply. Many places are outlawing it. It's extremely toxic, and it also raises the heat island index when it's used. And people complain that it's much hotter than natural gas. I'm surprised the Parks Department is still using it, as you are in Susan Smith Park. So are you working on eliminating it as a go-to? It should be a last resort, not a first resort material. It's extremely toxic.
So we have been very closely studying it over the years, and the product has progressed as it's developed. It's not the product of 20 years ago. We disagree with you that it's toxic. We've done a lot of studies on that as well. There's a barrier, so anything that goes through it does not go through into the drainage facility and into the water supply or anything like that. The materials that are used now, the silicone coated sand, is much cooler. You're correct. When they first started coming out with this stuff, it was very hot. Not as hot as concrete or asphalt, but certainly hotter than natural grass. And we started putting misters, these little spray things in. The material that's being used now is significantly cooler because of the silicone coated sand. Again, I'm not an engineer or a scientist. We don't use it like broad brush in place of grass. We use it where there's the possibility of wear and tear, where grass would become either mud or sand, depending on the rainfall. So when you have, there's some playgrounds that have it as a little play area where kids would be in a small area. South Oxford has it sort of as a multi-purpose. It's a little bit of kiddie soccer. We would never put adults or older people on that. This is for 10 years old and less. People can put blankets out and so on. There's been some performances there. But most typically, especially the infill, is used where you have rectangular sports like soccer, rugby, football, things like that. The reality is that grass would not survive a season. And in my 38 years, I've seen that where you've put millions of dollars into grass. Unlike a lot of communities in smaller towns, New York City fields do not get any rest. They are constantly used year-round, every daylight hour, and then when there's lights, it's even more. The stakeholders that use it, the coaches and the Little League managers and stuff, also follow the safety on it, and many of them insist on it. Especially, we don't use it on cricket fields. We don't use it on standalone baseball fields. But anywhere there's a possibility of rectangular sports is where we use it. And we believe we're using a safe product when we do that. We're doing it in Red Hook right now, but it has definitely evolved over the years. It was originally crumb rubber, as I understand it, that was recycled car tires initially, and this is again going back 20 plus years. It hasn't been that product in a long time.
Thank you. Taya, do we have a question on another subject?
Two more on the topic of other, John Dew and then Kevin Duggan.
John?
Yes. I have a couple of questions. Marty,
Hi,
how are you doing, Marty? Fort Greene Park.
We're not talking about Fort Greene Park right now, John. Anything but Fort Greene Park.
No, I'm talking about the benches outside of Fort Greene Park. Is that part of the Parks Department also?
On the perimeter sidewalk?
Yeah, yes, on DeKalb Avenue.
Yes.
They were removed probably more than 2 decades ago, and we had
more than
discussed
3 decades ago.
Yeah, we had discussed replacing some of those benches. So I don't know where that's at. In any event, I had a couple of other questions.
It's not a funded project.
Okay, so we have to get it funded. Okay, Barbara, please add that to the list. Marty, at one point, Community Board 2 had the least amount of park space in any district in New York City. Is that still the case?
I don't think that was ever the case. I believe it's Community Board 12 and then Community Board 14. I think there's one in the Bronx that doesn't have a lot, but certainly not Community Board 2.
And my final question for tonight is we're supposed to be eventually getting a park on Willoughby Street that I am told is not going to be operated by the Parks Department. If that is indeed the case and the Brooklyn Partnership is supposed to be operating the park, would you have anything to do with that park's operation, the building and or the upkeep after it's built?
I'm unaware of it, so the likelihood of us being responsible in any way for it is not great.
Now, and I'm not going to ask you if you have an opinion on that.
Thank you.
But it certainly, when it does get built, we believe that the Parks Department of New York City should be involved in it. But you're not at all involved in that particular park?
I'm not aware of it, no.
No, he's talking about Willoughby
You're not
Square.
aware of it?
So,
Or you're not aware of any involvement?
Correct. I'm not aware of the project, nor am I aware of any parks involved.
Marty, I think
Okay.
he's referring to the Willoughby Square project, which you did speak
Willoughby
about.
Street.
You're talking about Willoughby Square, John?
It's on Willoughby Street and Duffield.
That's the Willoughby Square Park, Willoughby Square Greene location, which we talked about earlier in terms of why it couldn't be called a park.
Oh, the one that EDC is going to speak on later?
Yes.
Yes,
they're
that
gonna-
is definitely not coming to me. I don't have the resources to maintain it. I don't know who will maintain it, but it is definitely not coming to me.
And my final question is the compensation at the top of Fort Greene Park ADA compliant?
I don't understand the question.
From Willoughby, from Washington Park, if you enter, you did that new exit on Washington Park. However, it does not appear that you can get up to the top of the park to access the comfort station in a wheelchair.
So Fort Greene Park, by the nature of the terrain, is never going to be in 100% compliance with the American with Disabilities Act. That's just not going to happen. What we're trying to do is make it as accessible as possible in the projects that are funded. So right now we have one large project. There will be an accessible entrance at Myrtle and Washington Park. There will be another one further down on Myrtle. There will be two accessible entrances on Myrtle and St. Edwards. And then the new paths are going to have less of an incline. Those I wouldn't call them new paths, those paths that were historically in the park that are being reintroduced. Those paths have less of an incline than the existing paths to get you closer to the top. It's essentially a hill all around, so you're not going to have universal compliance in every part of the park.
All right. Thank you.
Until
Thank
those
you,
other projects are
John.
funded.
All right, Mr. Dugan, I believe you had a question. And going forward, I would ask people, try to limit yourselves to one question, two at the most, so we can hear from everyone who wants to speak.
Hey, yes, thanks for taking my question.
Your mute went back on.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
All right. Sorry about that. The War Memorial in Cadman Plaza, would you open up the interior with the wall of the 11,500 Brooklynites who died in World War II?
So that's our hope. Just finishing the elevator isn't going to make that open. There's still the bathrooms to do. There's 2 phases of electric out in the building. There's HVAC and windows and doors and a lot of other stuff that has to happen. We want it to be open to the public. We want to be staffed up where we can have both volunteer docents and either rangers or staff so that school kids can come in there and learn, so that people visiting Brooklyn can come in there and learn, so that it has some kind of programming that is respectful to the names of those folks. And you got the number right. You know, that we want families are allowed to come in now, families that have a name on there, and we have the names cataloged, so we can even send people from across the country if they had a grandfather, granduncle, or whatever, we could send them a picture of the name. But it's not like when the elevator is done, okay, open the doors. We do have new doors that you can open, but there's other things that have to happen to make it safe and openable to the public. But that's our intention. It may take a few projects to do that.
All right, great. Thanks for answering that. The other one is the class and playground renovation. I know one of the issues at that playground is that it basically became a parking lot for the adjacent police precinct. I don't know how much of an issue that is still now. I haven't been there in a few weeks.
It's not an issue. We did it when there was emergencies on the street. We ended it very quickly. It was just during a crisis period where they needed it. We helped them out. And let me just clarify, we are not renovating class and playground. The asphalt area, the multi-purpose play area that has some courts on it, is getting a repaving and some new lines on it. I wish we could do the whole playground, but that's not the case.
Will you, I guess, just kind of follow up on that, will you continue to have an agreement like that with NYPD? If they need it, then they can.
It's not an agreement. There was a citywide emergency happening. Cars were being burned on the street. Police were being shot. Riots were happening everywhere. They needed a place to have control over. We gave it to them for a very limited time. It wasn't any kind of agreement. It was facilitating something in emergency. It ended within less than 2 weeks. It's not something that we take lightly. Even when there's a funeral or some kind of special event, we never say okay for people to park in there unless there's a very extreme emergency, and in any park.
Chair Zoller, you're muted. I believe that is the end of the list of questions not related to Fort Greene Park.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're now going to turn our attention to Fort Greene Park. I realize there are quite a few questions about your proposal, and as I understand, I just want to clarify, tonight you were just asking for the committee's vote on this new area that you showed us, basically pathways and connectors. So I want people to keep that in mind as we approach this. So we're going to start with, thank you. We're going to start with committee members. So are there questions from Parks Committee members concerning this design for Fort Greene Park?
Yeah, I kind of have a question.
Oh, Lenny, you're raising your hand? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, somebody earlier was talking about, and you were too, Marty, about putting synthetic surface and rectangular sports areas. There is an area in Fort Greene Park, I think most people, including you, I'm sure, are aware of, that always becomes a big dust bowl. And it's usually because people always like to play soccer there. And it's going to happen, it always happens, that they will be playing soccer there. And you cannot play grass there. As you said, it just will be a waste of money. Would that be a good area to put some sort of a rectangular soccer synthetic surf type field in?
No, it wouldn't be, for a couple of reasons. One, there is no athletic field in Fort Greene Park. We have a basketball court, but there is no athletic field in there. Two, it's a landmark park, so we could not put it if we wanted to. I would certainly never introduce a synthetic turf field into Fort Greene Park. I do have a thought on that, though, and I've had it for a long time. Within 2 blocks of Fort Greene, in several directions, there are 4 playgrounds. As I get older, I can't remember. I think Oracle is one. I'm not going to try to name them, but each of them have small asphalt, what we call multi-purpose play areas. I would recommend, there's something called fuzzball. which is sort of 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 or 5-on-5 soccer. So it's a mini soccer field. I would recommend converting each of those asphalt fields, because then you can go up to the soccer players and say, hey, listen, there's a place 1 block this way or 2 blocks this way. You can play soccer all you want, and then you're not destroying the field. I think when we get to the design part of that portion of Fort Greene, like I said, the projects we're doing aren't going to wave a wand and fix everything that's wrong with Fort Greene. And to his credit, Jeff Sandron actually did get that field to grow grass, but you have to water it constantly and keep it fenced in and so on. I think in a future design, you position things and you have undulations and things. We have some brilliant landscape architects that are joining us tonight. So you could situate it in such a way where you wouldn't have pickup soccer, but you can still enjoy beautiful green grass and, you know, pull out a blanket or whatever. That whole project isn't funded, nor are the satellite fields funded. But I think that that method would be the best way to address that. It's very tough to go up to people that are engaging in a sport in a park and say, hey, you know, you got to move on. You know, nobody's going to rotate the use of the field or whatever. And it takes some intense watering to maintain grass. I might think in some of the path work that we're doing in this, I would think we would be adding water service nearer than it is now, so that you can do that. Because I know typically when you're redoing paths, we already said we were redoing one of the drinking fountains, you would add water service so that we could water the lawns and things like that, which, you know, when you have a drought or whatever. So, but that project isn't funded, nor are the satellite projects. And certainly we wouldn't consider it in Fort Greene Park. The Landmarks Preservation Commission would never allow us to do that.
Thank you.
Any other committee members have questions about Fort Greene Park? Dwight?
Hi, Marty. My question isn't specifically about the West Park landscape proposal, but more specifically about where we are with Parks Without Borders part of the project.
Dwight, can you speak a little louder? It's hard to hear you.
Oh, I was asking not specifically about the West Park landscape proposal, but more generally about Parks Without Borders, where we are with moving forward on that. And can you hear me?
Yes. So all of that is part of this contract. All of the approvals for that and for phase 2 have been done already. We're combining all of the phases into one project. We're adding this so that we add acreage so that it would be typical to do the environmental impact statement. We wouldn't have typically done an environmental impact statement on just the Parks Without Borders and the phase 2 because it's smaller than what we typically do that for. We've been ordered by the court to do a statement. So what we're doing is we're adding scope and we're adding acreage on it. It's replacement in kind stuff so that it's all going to be part of one contract. The environmental impact statement will be on all 3 phases, but you've approved the phase 2 and phase 3 already.
Right.
We're asking for the approval on this additional part that was outlined in blue, what we're calling the West landscape.
Got it. Now, just follow up. Or is the lawsuit related to Parks Without Borders resolved?
So we're acting on orders from the court to do the environmental impact statement.
Okay, thank you.
Any other committee members who have questions on Fort Greene? All right, now we'll go to community board members.
That would be Mr.
I don't have to dance, do I?
All right, John, you have a question. Let's try to keep it to one question, please, John. Combine it into one question. You've already had 4.
Who's counting? I don't.
I am.
I don't have.
I assure you, I am.
I
I want everyone to have a
will
chance to
retract-
ask their questions.
I will retract my question. I have no questions, Barbara.
All right, thanks, John. I owe you one. All right, are there any other board members who have questions? Taya, have you heard from any other board members? All right, so I assume you have a list of people who are not on the board who would like to ask questions.
Oh, I do.
All right, so I'm going to let you, and remember, please, 2 minutes and 1 question so that we can have everybody ask their questions.
I believe the first person actually had to step off. Is Talia Cohen still on the call? If not, I will try to find her question in chat and ask it for her. Julia was next on the list.
Yeah, hi, I'm here. Thank you everyone for hosting this and for all the information. I live in the neighborhood. I'm a mother and a public school teacher, and I'm very, very, very concerned about the impact on air quality with the cutting down of so many trees. And the fact that there was no studies done on the environmental impact until there was a lawsuit concerns me. I don't believe anyone here wants to hurt the park, but I think that maybe people are not aware of the impact of pollution on people's health, especially young kids. So is there a plan to have a study done on the impact of air quality that this project would have if it goes forward?
So the consultant that is doing the environmental impact statement will let us know according to a set of criteria that's established already, whether there is an environmental impact, and we'll act accordingly based on those recommendations.
Can I ask you, who are you as the consultant?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. That's it. I don't want to take too much time. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank
Talia's
you.
question actually was addressed. Her question was, is there a plan to address festival area of Fort Greene Park? It's the flattest part of the park to sit and picnic, but the grass is sadly gone. I know many neighbors would love to see grass there. I think that question was addressed.
It's not funded in this project.
Okay, next is Kelly Schaffer. Ms. Schaffer, we see you, but you're muted. Actually, Ms. Schaffer, I see a note on your screen that you may be having some bandwidth issues. I recommend actually turning your video feed off, so then we might be able to hear you at least. I'll come back to you. Next is Monique Cumberbatch. Marty, we're losing them. Okay, next is Audrey.
Hi. My question is related to the environmental impact statement. I mean, we've been working on this for about 3 years now, and yet we're still sitting here now after so many different iterations of this project have already been approved without any kind of environmental impact study being done about the removal of trees and the way in which the whole thing is being done. I mean, how is it that at this stage, when the court actually made the decision to ask for that so many months ago, that we're still here today and we don't have that information yet?
We don't have an environmental impact statement yet because we don't have a contract out for bid. The contract is going to encompass this new phase and the 2 previous phases. The consultant, whoever that person is, when we have it out for bid and gets awarded, will have to do the environmental impact statement based on all phases of the park project. You're muted. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Audrey, you're muted.
Okay, so then to go back to that, then who's actually going to make the decision on which consultant is chosen? Is it going to be an independent third party? How are we as the community going to know that it was done in a way that is like fair and not just one-sided to support the project?
I am not a specialist in that. An independent consultant has to be hired as part of the bidding the project out. That person can't make up the rules as they go along or say, hey, Marty says to do it this way. There are criterion. These studies happen all the time. They have to follow those criterion, pass the information on to us. We issue a statement based on that gets reviewed by the borough president, the community board, the mayor's office, and the council member, and then we take the steps accordingly from there.
And I have a question related to that. Is this consultant going to be hired separately and give the consultant's report and then you go and bid the whole project, or is this consultant tied to the whole project?
Dennis and Paul, I don't know the answer to that. Do you guys know how that works?
Hi, it would be an independent consultant that would be hired by Parks and would make the determination, whether it would be a negative or positive determination on the environmental impact of the area in question.
And once that's determined, the rest of the whole project will be put out to bid? Is that the process?
Once we have their determination and we know what that determination is, we would then be able to move forward, make alterations, what have you, based on their determination.
And then bid the whole project.
And at that point, then we could, or alterations, or whatever their determination dictates, we would have to abide by.
Okay, thank you so much.
Can I just correct something? I'm saying things from memory. It's an environmental assessment statement, not an environmental impact study. I was using the terminology a little mixed up. We're required to do an environmental assessment statement, and that's what the consultant will do, and we'll act accordingly from that. It's not an environmental impact statement.
Right. Okay. All right, Taya, further questions?
Next on the list was Lucy Coteen. Did you have an additional question?
This is Kelly, and I just got on my phone and I can't use the chat, but I'm here now.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
I was just wondering about, given that there's been 4 years of community opposition to removing the trees and installing additional cement for the plaza, I'm just wondering why, why have alternatives to that design not been offered in this process, given that there's been 4 years of pushback about it? And also, another person previously in this call mentioned that for the Greene playground, there was a community visioning process where it sounded like people were given the opportunity to give open-ended feedback prior to the design being given. And I'm wondering why that same process was not done for Fort Greene originally, or not being done now, given that there's clearly community concerns about the design.
So the earlier designs for Fort Greene had more public input than any project I've been involved with in 38 years of being in parks. We had not 1, but 4 scope meetings for the Parks Without Borders. We had 2 scope meetings for the phase 2. Besides that, there were 3 at least public meetings about Parks Without Borders in general. Parks Without Borders was voted on for Fort Greene. Out of all of Brooklyn, only Prospect Park and Fort Greene won. So that's not exactly correct. But the phase 2 and the phase 3 projects have been approved by the community board. We're asking for approval for this additional part, is what we're here for.
I hear that about there has been a lot of community input. My impression during this time, sorry, Rosie, okay, sorry. My impression during this time is that the input from the community has been pretty strongly concerned about the plaza and not wanting it. So it feels disingenuous to say there's been lots of community input when it feels like that community input has been largely ignored and no alternatives have been offered. So I hear though that this is not the main focus of this, but I just wanted to express a little frustration at the framing of that as community input. If it's not community input that then is used in the decision making.
Is there a question, or are you just expressing frustration?
No, I was just expressing frustration. My first question stands.
Okay,
Thank you,
Taya.
Ms. Schaffer. Next up is Lucy Coteen.
Yeah, hi. I have many questions.
Lucy, let's keep it to 2 questions at most, please, so everyone else can ask their questions.
This is a yes and no. Are you removing the mounds and the beautiful floral circle near the entrance that attracts birds and pollinators? And are you still planning a 43-foot hardscape plaza? Yes or no?
Could you say it again slow, Lucy, please?
Are you removing the mounds and the beautiful floral circle near the Myrtle Avenue entrance that attracts birds and pollinators? And are you still planning a 43-foot hardscape plaza?
We are removing the mounds, yes. We are creating a beautiful floral landscaped area in the circle that we hope will attract many pollinators and all of the things that you said.
Well, you have a beautiful floral circle right now. Why would you remove that?
Because we have a design that's approved that enhances the trees that are there. We're going to expand where the trees are, and that will have also landscaping done within that according to the plan that we reviewed earlier.
Okay, next question. Why do you keep insulting and referring to Norway maples as an invasive species? As I'm sure you know, they are listed with the New York State Department of Conservation as regulated, not prohibited, and are not considered a problem when they exist in a controlled environment. They are known to be a hardy tree that gives superior shade and are excellent at sequestering carbon and reducing the heat island index, and have a lifespan of at least 100 years. The trees in the park are in excellent health. These large trees help reduce asthma and reduce the need for air conditioning. So I ask you, stop calling them an invasive species. That's not how they are considered that in other places, but not in a regulated environment, and that's not how they're listed by the NYC Department of Conservation. These are excellent trees. That's why they were planted all over the city, because they give great shade. They're hardy and sturdy and survive. And they last 100 years. I don't remember what you said, but they have a very long life. And these trees have been seen as in excellent health.
So Lucy, I never used the phrase invasive species at all. I said they were illegal. I said they were illegal. I said they were illegal in some countries. And I said, we don't plant them typically anymore. We've had a lot of difficulty. I didn't say that they're not hardy species. They can grow in the proper environment. They can grow very well. In this instance, they were planted very, very close together in the 70s, much more than you would see in a forest environment or in a park environment. I have 2 Norway maples in my backyard. They are only 40 years old. They're in decline. They have about 10 years left in them. The ones that we have here, when we started this, I'm going to say 4 or so years ago, our professional people, our trained in forestry, looked at them, and many of them were in decline, and they estimated back then between 5 and 10 years, if my memory is correct, till they begin decline. We don't do this as a regular thing. When you have an opportunity, parks don't get that much funding in time, but if they're in decline anyway, and we had the endorsement and approval of the community board on that phase. I'd like to remind you again, what we're in here to discuss is the phase 3 that we're doing.
Okay, next on the list is Lorena Allen. Oh, you're muted, Miss Allen. We can see you. Your mute button is probably in the bottom left.
No, I got it was a pop-up. Hi. Oh my God. If I have 25 questions and I'm only allowed to ask one now, when will I be able to ask my other 24 questions? I do have other questions, but I kind of don't understand why are we limited to questions, and why is it only for that one part of the park?
Well, Ms. Allen, thank you for being here this evening. I want everyone to have an
That's not my
opportunity.
one question. Yeah, that's not my one question.
Right.
Okay.
I want everyone to have an opportunity to speak. I said 2 questions. We don't want to end tonight
Well, okay,
without
I'm gonna-
everyone having an opportunity.
I've
So
heard that.
ask 2
Okay, I'm sorry.
questions.
Okay, I'll start.
Thank
Well,
you.
the first one would be, and we will have time to ask these questions later. Okay,
You could
now
always
in-
write to the Parks Department or put your questions in the chat.
So, okay. Well, one of the things that I see that's happening is that you're adding acreage. And when you say adding acreage, where is the acreage that you're adding? Is that just the Myrtle Avenue sidewalk? Is that the added acreage, or where else? It's part of a multi-part question.
I think you misunderstood. We're not adding acreage to the park. We're adding acreage to the project. It's the outlined area in blue.
And so will that be taking you over 10 acres at this point, when you were under 10 acres before?
It takes us to the amount of acreage that we would typically do an environmental assessment statement.
And what amount of acreage is that?
Paul?
It is over 10 acres. It is over 10 acres, yes.
So
I have been so educated actually in this process. So can you show me a picture of where the added acreage is?
It was on the design. It was that blue area that we outlined in the presentation.
So you had like about 20 different slides. So can you tell me what it is? Is it the Myrtle Avenue sidewalk or?
No,
Okay,
it's so if you could picture, when you come
now
up.
I get it. Wait, okay, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the pathways, the new pathway part. Is that the new?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And so now with this addition, you are now over 10 acres, which you were under before. So that's why you're having an EAS as opposed to an EIS.
No, that we're having an EAS because the court wanted us to do that. It's not typical for parks to do that for a smaller project. So we got additional funding to bring it over the 10 acres so that it would be what we typically would do in EAS.
Okay, well, I guess that'll be something that will be in question later. So you've been talking about, with several questions that have been asked, you've been speaking on criteria. And I'm wondering if the criteria that you're speaking of, is that available someplace?
I'm sure it is. I'm not an expert at all in EAS.
No. So where do you find, so if that's part of the project, how can I access the criteria?
You may want to Google it or something, and I'm not that educated on it, but there are criteria out there. You can't just have a consultant come and make up stuff. There is New York City criteria for this. It's something you might want to Google and read up on.
Okay, so then but before you change, so this is my main question, is before I wrote my question before you said it was only going to be on the pathways. Will you still be
No, that's
shaving?
not correct. The EAS is for the entire project.
No, I'm saying you said that our questions could only be on the pathways. I'm sorry, I'll try to make this clear.
I didn't say that. I said that's what today's presentation is about.
I'm sorry, I didn't say that. We're talking about Fort Greene Park, but I did make it clear that the vote tonight is going to be just on this new section.
Okay. So I'm sorry. So my main question was, will you still be shaving off the canopy of the London planes that are over the mounds?
I'm not aware of that being part of the plan. What we do in any project is called compensatory pruning. It's pruning that makes the tree more healthy. So we would be doing pruning that's compensatory to make the tree healthy, but we would do that to any of the trees in the project zone. We're not doing anything other than that to the London plane trees.
On one of several renditions of the project, described in one of the little asides, it said that they would be, as the main desire of the project was to make a clear view to the monument, that they would be removing the interior canopy of the London Plains, and it shows in all the pictures, so that you can't. The London Plains now, like, they are like this, and the new pictures are like this. It said that they would be removing the interior canopy of the London Plains. I'm just wondering if you still will be doing that.
Paul, well, the design hasn't changed, but Paul, could you speak to that at all?
There would be selective pruning of those London plains to open up a small vista up to the monument. We are not removing the canopy of those trees. It is
What
selective
else?
pruning of those trees.
What else could that mean, to make a view to the monument? I don't understand. I'm sorry.
We wouldn't do
right
any
now, the
pruning
canopy-
that's harmful to the tree.
Wait, so could you
Correct.
restate that? Could you restate that once again? You're doing a selective pruning so that you can.
Of certain branches so that the monument becomes part of the lower plaza as it was once in its history. It's a wonderful.
That would mean removing the canopy. Otherwise, that's the only thing that you're doing.
That's not what we are going to
No,
do.
not at all. And
What
we
is
would not
it?
prune anything that's unhealthy for the trees.
Well,
Correct.
unhealthy, but then also opening up the canopy is not good for
He said selective several times. You might have missed that. Selective pruning that is not damaging to the trees. That's
I'm
what
not
we would
saying
do.
damaging. It's also
In the
about the
approved design
shaded
that we have.
area. Okay, yeah, no, that's
Sarah
not what it
Granger,
says.
this
But okay, I guess we'll just see.
This is already question 25. It is
Sorry, I
time
couldn't
to move
resist. I had to hear.
Oh, who said that?
All right,
No.
thank you.
Alan?
I think they've responded, they've been responsive to
Yes.
that question.
Yes.
So Taya,
Thank you.
do we have someone else who wants to ask a question?
We do. We have quite a list. Virginia Pruitt is next.
All right, so at this point then, given that we have quite a list, we're going to have to enforce the 2-minute rule. And Taya, I'm looking to you to do that, please.
Okie dokie. Virginia Pruitt, are you still with us? No. Okay. Sandy Rayburn. Sandy Rayburn is surely
I
still
can't
here.
hear you, Sandy.
Yes, she is. You're muted, Sandy.
There we go.
Hi, Sandy.
Okay, thank you. Hello, Marty. I'm one of the ladies, you know. Anyway, what I wanted to say is that it begs credulity to have us trust you when you said that there were sick trees and many of them were actually for redesign. So with that having been said, my concern apropos of the parallel that's going to happen with the Rabsky development adjacent to the park that's going on at 960 Franklin, having to do with the impact on the Brooklyn Botanic Garden plantings, is very concerning. So while we don't know yet what Rabsky is going to do on St. Edward's and Willoughby, we do know that the Brooklyn Hospital must have had some communication with you apropos of this effort going forward. So my question is this: what, if anything, have you discussed with either Lenny Singletary, who works for the Brooklyn Hospital, apropos of selling the lot, or for that matter, for the Fort Greene Conservancy, insofar as towers will shadow the park and will impact the users of that park and the plantings there? Rabsky is a developer that has been notorious for building such things as a 79-story tower a couple of blocks away, and he has a huge footprint of the Brooklyn Hospital that was just sold. So I want to know what the Parks Department is going to do to defend trees, since you've been such a stalwart defender of 83 trees that are looking to be eviscerated. So that's my question.
So we have a planning division in parks. I don't really get very involved until things become reality. I did see some conceptual presentation about 2 years ago. I honestly don't recall that much of impact on the park, but I don't remember seeing the full plan. We have a planning division that does that. We are defensive of trees, despite what you might think. People have to pay restitution if tree removal is even considered. Tree restitution is very expensive. I'm unaware of any, that's the first thing a developer would have to give us. But again, this is handled in the planning office. I don't know any timetable or full plan out for, I know that there's something to do with Brooklyn Hospital, but I don't know any details on it whatsoever. I haven't seen any tree impact reports or any detailed reports. Like I said, I saw a maybe 8-minute presentation on it 2 years ago.
Commissioner Marr, if I may follow up with that question.
That's not up to me. That's
talking about restitution is damning that punishment with faint praise. With $1 million apartments, a few thousand, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 for a few trees ain't going to be worth a hill of beans. So I think it's incumbent upon you to learn what's going on, since you are so fully engaged in making the park a better place. And I won't dispute your integrity in terms of wanting to do that. But I think it's incumbent upon you, incumbent upon Fort Greene Conservancy, to ask what the hell is going on, especially when the head of CB2 has a conflict of interest. So that being said, I look to you for learning about it, since you want us to learn about this stuff.
Well, like I said, we have a planning division that deals with this stuff. When it comes to reality and impacts on the park, that's when I get involved. So I can promise you that when and if that happens, I will engage with the community board and I will relay whatever facts are sent to my way. But that it has not come to that stage whatsoever.
All right, thank you. I want to remind people we're talking about the plan that is on the table at the moment in front of us for voting on this evening. I think, Sandy, you may get some answers to your questions if you check the chat. Taya, is there someone else who wants to speak? And again, please limit yourselves to 2 minutes.
Yes, and let's make this last call. We've got 3 folks left. If you'd like to ask a question, the host. Next up is Enid Brown.
Hi. So mine also has to do with trees. 83 trees. We know from the ongoing Parks Without Borders project that the forestry report showed the bulk of those trees were healthy. And what occurred to me here is, if the trees being removed are mostly for design purposes, how is it and why is it that you would ignore the advice of the consultant you all hired, Nancy Owen, who looked at the complete park? And what she recommended was phasing tree removals as needed with newer, younger trees, given 30 years time in order to adequately replace them. And what has been clear, the reason you've been fought on the one Parks Without Borders section is that the trees, all the environmental issues have been subjugated to the design. And why? Why shouldn't environmental interests and all be subject to have the design subject to those priorities? And so again, I ask, why remove 83 trees in one fell swoop? And then we've got the heat island for the next 30 years until assuming the trees survive, they can adequately replace.
So Enid, I think you misunderstood some of the things I said. 83 trees are being removed. 32 of those are for condition. The remaining 51 are for design purposes. Half of those are the Norway maples. Those Norway maples were found to be in decline and expected to have a capacity, like I said earlier, between 5 and 10 years because of the way that they were planted. The environmental assessment statement is going to be looking at that. The environmental assessment statement is looking at every phase of the park, not just the phase that we're talking about tonight seeking approval, but for the Parks Without Borders phase, including those trees, and for the phase 2, which was approved a long time ago as well. So that environmental assessment statement will look at all of those things and make recommendations to us, and we will act accordingly.
And you will issue a full forestry report on all 83 trees?
I did not say that. Because I am following directions of the court. The court asked us to do an environmental assessment statement. That's what we're doing. Paul described how that is.
Not true.
Paul described what that is to you. I've explained the trees to you as best I can, and I'm sorry if you disagree, but if the environmental assessment statement tells us to do something, we're going to comply with that.
The forestry report was part of the lawsuit basis because it contradicted what this committee was told. I'm just saying they're not mutually exclusive.
Thank you, Ms. Braun. Next with the question is Rachel Cole. You're muted, Ms. Cole. We can see you. Ms. Cole, we can see you, but we can't hear you. You are still muted. Okay, we'll come back to you. Sam, oh, are you there? Okay, Sam Burns from the Fort Greene Tennis Association has a question with a visual. And Ms. Allergringer, I apologize. I missed someone with another topics question earlier. There was a technical glitch. Victoria Vasquez would like to ask about Cadman Park, and that is it. So Sam Burns, are you ready? Or Anna?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just make it sure I won't include the visual for now. Just curious if lights could potentially be added to the tennis courts as part of the upcoming project. We've surveyed our community, 100 people responded. The vast majority want lights. We are pretty close to halfway there to having enough funding to pay for the lights, if that's something that we could do. And we've gotten a quote. So we're, we've done a bunch of research on this. Just curious, since I know there's some other electrical lighting work that will be done in the park, if there might be a way that we could partner with you all to install lights at the courts, which would increase accessibility, but we think by about 30%, which is quite a bit given how busy the courts are. That's my question.
So the short answer is no. I would like to talk to you offline rather, about what your estimate is. You would not be permitted to do capital work in the park. That would have to be done via the Parks Department. Like any project, it would typically be a much higher figure than what you're probably thinking it is. It would need to be funded. I understand your desire for lights, and I totally get it. I would want your efforts to do other things for tennis, for kids and for stuff like that. The fundraising you need to do for the amounts that it would cost to do lighting is probably far greater than you're thinking, but I'd be happy to talk to you offline about and get an estimate. I don't have an estimate at all, but it won't be included in this project for sure. It's not a small figure. This project is 3.75. That's already probably stretched to the limit. I did want to include other things in the park. Like I said, there's many, many needs in the park. I'm sure you're all aware. This isn't going to with a swipe of a wand, fix all of those problems. There are many projects that remain in the future, and that would have to be one of them that we need funding. I will ask my capital friends to just take a note to let's get a cost out for what it would cost for lighting the tennis courts for play, and we could look at that together with you in a separate conversation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Burns, we can connect you with their team tomorrow. The last question was from Victoria Vasquez regarding Cadman.
But before we get that, can I just say one more thing? I always like to be forward about things. You also have to look at priorities. And I'm sure you've heard about people's demand for a bathroom. We have some other conditions in Fort Greene Park that are not great. And then compare that with the whole community board needs for playgrounds and things like that. You need to look at lighting tennis courts in the same context of that. Whatever elected official is going to fund that, they have to weigh it against all of those priorities too. So I don't want you to make it sound like, oh, it's just getting the funding that's easy. You know, that those priorities are going to be weighed by whoever the elected officials in the future.
Yep.
Hi, my name is Victoria, and I'm from the Take Down Columbus group, which is a group of educators in Brooklyn that teach, the history of Columbus. And we advocate for the removal of the Columbus statue in downtown Brooklyn. And I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it, but there was a letter of support from the Yucca Committee and the Parks and Recreation Committee to have the statue removed. So I just wanted to introduce myself and ask, because I'm sure, ideas turning into action takes more steps. So what it would practically take to have the statue removed, if it could be included in the Cadman Plaza East project, or if there's something else that you would need from our group and community to support the removal of the statue.
So it won't be included in the Cadman Plaza East project that's already done. It would likely need to be its own funded project. I did receive a letter that's several pay grades higher than me. So I forwarded it to our monuments people. Decisions like that are made in concert with the mayor, and there's a whole committee on monuments and so on. There are monument specialists in parks that have been doing this stuff for a long time. So I'm not the guy that says it stays or it goes, and I'm not the guy that says it costs this much to remove it and where do we put it and stuff like that. I did get the letter, and I did, pass it along to the people who would bring that up to the mayoral level.
Okay, thank you. How would I be able to follow up with a response to that letter?
There'll be a response to the community board, I'm sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
So you can check in with the community board when they get the response.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone who is attended this meeting and has asked questions, and particularly Marty Marr, who's spent much more time than I anticipated him spending with us this evening. So thank you for that. So I'm now going to turn it over back to our committee and see if anyone has a motion on the proposal concerning this new section of the park that is being included in the Parks Without Borders extended project. Andrew, did you have a motion?
Yes, I move that, recommend that our Parks Committee submit a letter to support the last project of this phase.
Do I hear a second on that? Mr. Levinson? Okay. Is there any discussion from committee members before we vote on that? Okay. Taya, did you want to poll the people to make sure we have everybody? So all those in favor, oh, I'm sorry, you're going to do it. Right.
I'm happy to do a roll call. Zoller-Gringer, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lastwacki, how do you vote?
Yes.
Harrison, how do you vote?
Yes.
Hubbard Kamananwiri, how do you vote?
Yes.
Levinton, your vote, please. Where did he go? He's muted.
I vote yes. Yes.
Thank you. Melby?
Yes.
Thank you. Quint?
Yes.
And Smith?
Yes.
Okay, that's a unanimous.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're moving on now to our next next matter. And is Eleni on the call now? I hope she is.
Yes.
Oh, good. I know last time I think I got your last name right, but I don't want to attempt it at the moment. I'm sorry. I don't want to mess it up.
No worries. I think I'm frozen, but I'm not sure if you all can hear me.
We can see you. You're moving, and we can hear you. And
Great.
you're from the Economic Development Corporation, and you're here to follow up. Thank you. On your last visit, where we were discussing the name for the green area at Willoughby Square.
That's right. And so I had followed up with a letter in response to the board. I believe where we had left it was you had asked me to follow up with the Department of Parks and Recreation, as well as city law and the Department of Transportation. So I've done all of those things, and am looking for a resolution on how to name this open space while honoring the abolitionist history, without using the word park in the name, which is not allowed based on the feedback that I received from city law.
Right. And as you mentioned in your letter, which was distributed to the committee members, that for the word park to be included in the name, it would imply that it is parkland within the jurisdiction and managed by the Department of Parks and Recreation, which Willoughby Square is not.
That's right.
So I think in discussions we had since this last meeting, there were well, let me first turn it over. Since did you want to say anything else before we turned it over to the committee members?
No, that's it. I think it's all in the letter that I had sent.
Okay, so in the letter it proposes calling it Abolitionist Plaza, Willoughby Square, Abolitionist Plaza, or Willoughby Square, or Willoughby. I don't. Abolitionist Square or Abolitionist Plaza. Those are the two names that were proposed in your letter. So does anybody have any questions for Eleni or other suggestions? Because I think they would like us to vote on one of these names this evening. I'm not sure if people would support it or not, but we have
Right.
this opportunity.
Sorry, I was going to add that this is one of the final gating issues, and so we do want to create the construction sign, which we want to make sure we are being responsive to the community board with a name in line with the abolitionist history, and so we're on hold to create the construction signage and start the construction process pending the resolution of this name. Sorry, Chair.
No, that's good. That's great. Thank you. Because we are, to me, that's the bottom line. When will this green space be open that I can go sit there and read a book? Mr. Moore, you have a question.
I just wanted to know, do you have any other Parks Department issues to discuss tonight?
Oh, no, that's it.
Could I excuse?
You don't want to stay?
Staff? Well, like I said before, I love you guys. And I do want to thank everybody that came. I know that you're all concerned about parks, and I appreciate you putting your time toward that. Whether we agree or disagree, we appreciate your support of parks. And I want to thank Community Board too for everything that you've done.
And again, thank you to you and your staff for being here and for you being so generous with your time. So yes, you're welcome to leave.
Okay. Thank you so much.
And before we get back to, I would just say, we are always looking for new members of this Parks Committee, and following up with what the commissioner said, people who are interested in parks, please keep coming to our meeting and look to join our committee. Then you can be among the first to ask questions. All right, I think, Dwight, was your hand up or Lenny? Was it Lenny who had a question here about the name?
Oh, no, I like the last, if you're referring to the last meeting we had, at first I said, well, the street was changed to Willoughby, from Willoughby to Abolitionist Place, or something with the name Abolitionist in it. Why not just change it to Abolitionist Square from Willoughby Square? And then I learned that before I was a committee member, that the board as a whole, years ago, made a motion and passed the motion to have it included not Willoughby, but Abolitionist something or other park. And I was a little bit upset that somebody would come along and say, no, you can't do that, when it turns out that other places that aren't under the auspices of the Parks Department were allowed to do this and have done this and are very well known areas, including Brooklyn Bridge Park. When I heard that, well, I was a little bit miffed, to say the least, as to why somebody would come in at the last minute and say, well, no, I say you can't do that, even though this was the will of the community board too. And it was a done deal before I became involved and became a member of the Parks and Recreation Committee. I mean, it definitely needs to have the name abolitionist in it. That's
There's
not
no
negotiable.
question about that. It will definitely have that name in it.
Okay, that's got to be, period. I'm still a little miffed why this is being just rejected out of hand to include park when it was a done deal and done by the complete board years ago. And at the last minute, the last second here, somebody is saying, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. And that to me is a little outrageous. I worked for years for a bureaucracy. I've worked for the Board of Ed, and I know what bureaucracy is, and that was one of the reasons I retired when I did, to get away from arbitrary and, well, the other word that goes with arbitrary and capricious behavior. I was incensed, and this incenses me in the same vein. Why would it not be called park when it was the will of the board, of the community board too? And such a done deal that it was probably just done and forgotten. It's, let's go on to new business. And now we have this issue again, which is holding up the whole construction. It's ridiculous. I don't understand it. I don't understand that this can be done, that the will of the community board can be just disregarded, thwarted, thrown out. I don't understand this. And I mean, I'd like to hear an explanation.
Sure. So I'm happy to respond to that. So, this was not a done deal. We had received a letter from the community board requesting that this be named Abolitionist Place Park back in October of 2019, while we were focused on the design for this, and had said that we would come back to the community board to discuss this further closer to construction. And now we are at that point of being closer to construction. Since then, we have vetted this request with the City Law Department and the Department of Parks and Recreation, as well as the Department of Transportation, to understand kind of the rules around plazas. And this is where we are today, that, for the reasons laid out in the letter, including the fact that this is not within the jurisdiction of the Parks Department, nor is it mapped parkland, this cannot include park in the name. Some of the other examples that you mentioned are not open spaces that EDC was involved in, nor are they open spaces that the city was necessarily involved with. My understanding, based on just the research that our team was able to do, is that many of those were state properties. And so that's why there's a difference between what is allowed there versus here. So this was vetted not just by EDC, but by all of our sister partner agencies. And we also have our maintenance partner on the call with us. That was another request from the last time we spoke, to have the Downtown Brooklyn partnership on the line as well. I hope that answers your question.
Well, the only thing I heard that was a little bit new was all those other areas were state properties, not city properties. That's the only new parameter I'm hearing here. I mean, I would wonder how other people from the community board feel about this. I know I heard what they felt last month at that meeting. I just still don't understand whether this is really illegal to be called a park or not. And I still think, and I'm not hearing anybody say different, that that was the will of the community board as a whole, to have it called Park, Abolitionist Square Park, Abolitionist something Park. And,
I think,
you know, I don't hear anybody saying different.
thank
And the
you.
intent
I
of
see.
that is there. Sorry.
I'm sorry. What did you say, Eleni? I'm sorry.
I was just saying that the intent is to include, as you were saying, abolitionist in the name. We are not veering away from that. The question is whether or not legally park can be included. And, you know, according to the lawyers at city law, that word cannot be included in the name. Therefore, we need to find a substitute. And so what we had proposed is, as you had said earlier, you know, it's called Willoughby Square today. Should it be called Abolitionist Square, Abolitionist Plaza, or another term, Abolitionist something else that is not park?
Dwight and Andrew. Dwight.
I you know, add your concern as well. But the bottom line is pretty much as described in the letter and confirmed by Marty earlier, and he made clear that this was not going to be a property he would have under his purview. So it seems to me that the question for us is it a park, a plaza, or is it a square? Beyond that, you know, and that's the issue. Particularly from Marty, just moments ago, essentially confirming what he had as representative letter.
Andrew.
Yeah, I heard the arguments. I support Libby's concern. I read the letter that the community board received from EDC. However, I will underline one word. It might not be appropriate. It doesn't say it's illegal. It might not be appropriate. And I also don't know, where is it telling us that the Parks Department has a patent on the word park? The only people that give patents out and lock it in is the Department of Patents. And I don't know this for a fact, but I would venture to look at all the parks of the city, or things that are under the jurisdiction of the Department of Parks, if there isn't some place that isn't a park, that's called something else, would completely defeat that argument. It's an open space. We were on this for years, that it would be a park. And I would just say, I would vote it in again as a park, and let the powers above us do whatever they wish after that. Let it be on their conscience. We as a community board in 1999, proposed that this be called Abolitionist Park, period, or whatever the appropriate term was. And just that the EDC now got a letter from the Department of the Law Department, it doesn't prohibit it. It just says would be inappropriate. It's just inappropriate. But we do have Brooklyn Bridge Park. It is a park, not under the jurisdiction of the New York City Department of Parks. End of story. It isn't. And I'm you know, it bothers me a little bit.
Carolyn.
Open spaces that do not have the Department of Parks emblem, that little maple leaf saying the Department of Parks, are clearly not operated by the Parks Department, period. So that shouldn't be an issue.
Can I speak, Barbara?
Sure, sure. Oh, wait, just what, John, Suzanne has a question, has a comment,
Yeah.
and then we'll get to you, John. Thank you.
I was going to say, I mean, I do find this bureaucratically annoying, and I don't agree with the rationale. But I guess for me, I feel like when people are sitting in there and having the experience in the space, I don't know if they're going to care if it's a park, if it's called a park or called a plaza. And so while again, I don't agree with the rationale, and I think, you know, if you poll New Yorkers, they're going to think that Brooklyn Bridge Park is a New York City park. And so that's why I don't agree with the rationale, but I lean towards getting this thing moving and created and creating more space for people, but going on record that I do not agree with the rationale.
All right, John?
Yes, so Barbara, if the community board has already voted on this and there has been a change, we need to find out why it did not come back to the community board to designate that it's not part of the city nomenclature for parks. This is not uncommon in the city of New York, that areas are being given over to private developers to maintain. This does happen throughout the city of New York. The question is it right to be happening, and how could it have slipped in for downtown Brooklyn without the knowledge of the community and the community board? So we first have to go back and find out how this happened and whether a process that should have included the community board did not include the community board. All these questions about who's operating the park, I mean, who do you call if there's an issue with the park? You know, I don't call the Parks Department. Who do you call if you have an issue with the park? Whose liability? There's a whole host of issues that are surrounding this park. We are being asked to approve every component of the park, and then we don't have responsibility that goes to the people who we are accustomed to going to for park-related issues. So there's a whole host of issues that have to be addressed before we can actually put a period at the end of this sentence.
I think listening to you, John, from what you're saying, it seems to me that this is not a park. I don't know, Belinda, did you want to say anything at this point?
Yeah,
They
thank
can't
you.
call it
Thank
a park. They
Sorry,
can't call
John?
it a park because the Parks Department would then have to be responsible for it. The Parks Department is responsible for all parks in the city of New York. So they got to call it a plaza or anything else in order to avoid it being called the park that it is. It's a park. This is all a game.
Okay.
Not explained to us.
So we do have, as you heard, a representative from the Downtown Alliance. So Belinda Cape, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Actually, the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership. I just want to say that we are so excited that after all these many, many years of wondering whether this open space would become a reality, we're on the verge of making it happen. Regina wishes she could be here. She's actually traveling in Utah in national parks at the moment. But I think you're all aware how hard she's fought for this to happen. I think and by the way, John, part of the process is once EDC received that finding from the City Law Department, we are back, EDC are back to talk to you about it. So it's not like, something happened in the dark. As soon as EDC got word, they're back to talk to you all. I agree. It's bureaucratically strange, but also it's not technically parkland. So the city has issued their finding. It would be a real shame at this moment when we are really on the verge of making this happen, that we get caught up in, what the plaque should say. You know, as Carolyn said, we're going to be sitting in the park. It's going to be a park, right? But it's called a plaza or it's called a place. It would be a real shame to get caught up in a technicality. I totally hear you on how it seems strange, but I think ultimately let's make it happen.
I liked your suggestion that it be Abolitionist Place. Andrew?
I just wanted to just opine on something very small on this. It's not a park, we're a parks department. Why are we discussing something that is not going to be part of parks? Why is EDC asking us to make a decision? Or the Brooklyn Alliance? It's not up to us. We discuss park issues. So why are we in the loop now when this is all of a sudden not a park issue?
Well, I think it's never been parkland, but the city has always worked with you on the future of this space for over a decade.
And we passed our word on it.
It was designed as parkland with the rezoning. We have changed the name only to allow the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership to manage it. When we did the rezoning, that area was carved out as the park space for Downtown Brooklyn to accommodate all of the office space and other commercial stuff that was supposed to be there. Now, everything in Downtown Brooklyn has changed, including this. But let's not pull this park out like it's something separate. This has been going on with a whole host of what's been happening downtown Brooklyn. This thing was just presented to us. I'm just hearing that the legal was involved in the transfer of the name from a park to something else. But we did not get this benefit at the community board. We are just hearing all of this nomenclature now. Communication is key. It has not happened. We have not been kept up to speed. That is why we're having this discussion now. I'm still not clear as to why it's not a park. Did Downtown Brooklyn request it and the city decided to give it to them and that's why it's not a park? What is the rationale for transferring it from the park to the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership? This has not come.
I think, John, it was never parkland. Eleni could confirm that. It was never parkland. It's never been taken away from parks.
That's right. And if I could just weigh in on a few things. So we've been to this community board many, many, many times through the entire design process. We came to the community board in an iterative way to show the various phases. And we were last year on the design, I believe, back in August of 2019. Then we came back to talk about the artist process and what engagement looks like around there and the selection of the artist that happened in January of this year. We also have to go through PDC approval. And before we go through that, we come to the community board. And so I was last year in March talking about the name as we have gotten closer to construction and closer to making this open space a reality. And so I was asked to come back to follow up on the items that we left open. This was never mapped parkland. It was never in the jurisdiction of the Parks Department. John, you're correct that this was part of the Downtown Brooklyn rezoning effort, and it was always intended through that process with a lot of feedback from this community board to be open space. And so this will always be open space. And what is that question here is, how do we honor the abolitionist history and what do we call it? And so we want to make sure that abolitionist is in the name so that we can be responsive to both the board and the history of the area. And so what is that second word? Is it place? Is it square? Is it common? Is it plaza? There are many options. Unfortunately, just the guidance that we received from the Department of City Law is that because it's not mapped parkland and because it's not in the jurisdiction of the Parks Department, park cannot be in the name.
Andrew, it doesn't say can't be in the name. It says it would be inappropriate. That letter is very carefully written. Inappropriate.
Well, since I have the partnership on the phone, in the initial iteration of that area, under that park was supposed to be a 400 or a 200 car parking garage. That somehow got eliminated. So we don't have an opportunity to get all of those illegally parked cars off of the streets of downtown Brooklyn. Did the partnership have anything to do with the elimination of the parking lot that was supposed to be built under that spot?
No, that was purely that was a failure of the respondent to the initial RFP on the parking garage. It turned out that they weren't capable of delivering that part of the proposal, so that was taken out of the park project. And I think you know that all of that placard parking, those people will not disappear and start paying for parking.
Belinda, that's not the issue in community board too. You're right. It's been there forever. We have to give them a spot, and then with a different administration, we'll get a different kind of enforcement. It's a gradual process, but when the process gets, we have to have a solution. That is what the community board had discussed decades ago, and that's how it's put into the plan. And then all of a sudden, it's out of the plan. So we remain challenged for that. We have sidewalks downtown Brooklyn you can't walk down.
Yep.
And that's
All right.
unfortunate.
Yep.
So just to give a little context to this, there are several things we could do now. We could take no action and then have no input as to what the name of this open space is. We can suggest a name that we haven't heard tonight that doesn't have the word park in it, or we can vote. As I said, I liked Abolitionist Place. If you're putting down names, Taya, thank you. I think one of the suggestions for Plaza came about because there are other plazas in the area, but you know, I think it's up to those of you who are here. You could also vote that you want it to be called a park, but they're not going to honor that, you know. So I think, and then this is going to go to the executive committee next week. I don't know if it's going to go to the full board or just to the executive committee, but I think it's time for you to think about what everybody wants to recommend. I know there are different feelings here as to how important it is that it be called a park or not. Andrew, can you be the last word on this?
I'm not going to be the last word, but any one of those
tonight
has the word abolitionist in it. That's something that we all want. And I would just recommend that we not do anything and let the original proposal from the community board of 1999 or whatever date that was to stand, and let the higher ups decide whether they want Place, Plaza, Square, and you know, spit in our face and say, you know, it can't be park. Let them make that decision.
So are you suggesting we come up with a recommendation that abolitionists be in the name of this space and that's it?
No, I say that our original proposal was that it be Abolitionist Park, period. That original letter stands, and whatever happens, it'll always have at least the word abolitionist in there, which is what we want and what we insist.
Chair Zoller-Gringer?
I kind of second what he's saying.
What Belinda said just a few minutes ago, when she was explaining to John that they took out the parking lot from the park. You slipped on that. You yourself said it because it was always considered a park. It was only just now that somebody in the Parks Department came up with this grandiose idea it can't be a park. And I don't buy that. They don't have a patent on the word park.
Okay, Taya, did you want to say something? Oh, Abolitionist Way. I like that. Or Abolitionist Parkway.
I think what we're doing is we can come up with 20 different names here and just it's becoming, I don't want to use the word farce, but
No,
agree
from
with
what I hear,
basically what I'm trying to say is I agree pretty much with what Andrew was saying. I didn't hear one person from all the people that were on the board and part of this in years past before I came to this to this committee that want to go along with changing what they decided years ago. I think they all want to stand. Andrew put it perfectly. I think we should vote on having that we vote to have the original decision, or however you want to say it, stand. We stand with the original name, Abolitionist Park, as proposed and passed by the community board in 2019, was it, Andrew?
I don't know. No.
no.
Oh, no, it was earlier than that.
I figured that because I thought I was here already by then.
Ms. Zoller-Gringer?
Yes, Taya.
I was just wondering if I could raise a question from the process and administrative end, which is my view. I certainly have no sway in this decision at all, but I wonder if there is some element of the letter of the law versus the intent of the law here. I believe that when the name change was agreed to by EDC, the intent of the name change was a green space that honors the abolitionist history, right? So I wonder if maybe Eleni or our friends from Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, can you explain what would happen if the committee does not agree on an alternative name tonight? How would that set the project back?
I mean, I guess from the perspective of EDC, we value our partnership with the community board. That's why we continue to come back and try to sort out this lasting issue and provide updates on the design and progress and all of that. We were hoping that we could sort this out and, there could be an announcement of this tied to for example, Juneteenth or another milestone within the community to really highlight the abolitionist history here. Like our goal is really to, follow the intent of the letter from the community board. No decision had been made in the past as to how to rename this space. It was a letter that we had received from Chair Singletary, and so we were simply following up on it and had always said that we would work with the community board closer to construction. And so if a decision isn't made, we can proceed with the construction signage with Willoughby Square, which is the project name for this area, pending a decision. But, I feel that would come across as disregarding the community board's intent to honor the abolitionist history. And our intent is not to ignore it. It's to follow the guidance of our agency partners and what's allowed under park and city law guidelines.
Well, if I could just say something, I happen to like the name Abolitionist Place. I think it lends it more gravitas than calling it a park. And, we have talked about, no one's voting here yet, Taya. We have talked about, I know you have some, you do have an artist, but there's been some discussion about some other sort of sculpture being there to honor some women. And I think a place, and hopefully there'll be more historical markers about why it's got the word abolitionist in it. And I think, to me, it sort of honors the abolitionist cause more to call it a place than to call it a park. It's like, I don't know if you can understand that, or you don't have to agree with me.
And sorry, Barbara, just to interject, I don't think anyone's mentioned the purchase recently of 227 Darfield by the city. So
right.
Another important element that is really going to push us over the edge and get this done. And all part and parcel of the entire project. It's really important. But
all right. That must be somebody's phone ring. At any rate, Are there any other members of the community board still on the line who want to say anything? And is there anyone who is not on the board who wants to raise a question here? Quickly.
Can you hear me?
John, yes, you're on the board.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but Barbara, given that we have to move this along, I would recommend that we go with Abolitionist Place. I agree. Replace is much more respectful to what it is supposed to represent. A plaza sort of has like a fun kind of thing. What happened on there is not fun. What happened in Duffield Street was not a good part. So a place that is recognizing it should be called a place, not a plaza.
All
I
right.
concur with Barbara and John.
I'm sorry, say that?
I agree with place as well.
I also like the word place. I agree with you, Barbara.
All right. So do I hear a motion?
So moved.
All right, Dwight, you're suggesting the name Abolitionist Place?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second it.
I just
Okay.
wonder what happened to.
Wait, 1 minute, 1 minute. We're in the middle of, all right. Jennifer seconds the motion. And now we have, if there's any discussion. Lenny, now you can.
I'm
you're free to
wondering what happened all of a sudden to the park. Like, all of a sudden, it's just left this conversation. Andrew, moments ago, was trying, I thought was making a motion to have it, that we vote to let it stand.
You got to deal with the motion that's on the floor, and then you can have the conversation.
What happened to Andrews trying to bring up his original motion?
There's a motion on the floor now.
John,
That has to-
Wait a minute.
John, my motion was on the floor to leave it the way we originally passed it. And the way Lenny's letters, wrote it up. Lenny seconded that. So, that is the first motion.
That's
I
what
didn't-
I was.
Sorry.
I apologize. I didn't hear that as a motion.
I made it as a.
So I guess I was motion so that we can
I
receive
made
the
this motion, and just as a discussion, you're gonna have an issue tomorrow after we name it Abolitionist Street or Abolitionist Place, that it's contrary because the street there has the same name. So why won't
You've already checked with the Department of Transportation. It shouldn't be an issue.
the Department of Transportation should throw it back at them? You can't use it because it's a street.
I could see that.
Yeah. You'd have to demap the street to name it something else.
No, I think Eleni just mentioned they talked to DOT and DOT do not have an issue.
All right.
Well, are we dealing with Andrew's motion first?
Well, I think we have a motion on the floor right now about Abolitionist Place. If that motion gets defeated, then we can entertain another motion.
Well, I guess the question is, to the extent that it was already on the floor, maybe it was out of order, and I should withdraw it.
All right, that's up to you, Dwight.
Like you, I had not heard to have made a specific motion that it was a discussion, but with that, apparently.
So, Dwight, are you withdrawing your motion?
I'm withdrawing my motion to deal with that which is on the floor that from Drew and.
But what was on the floor was not seconded because nobody knew it was a motion. It wasn't seconded.
Lenny Levinson seconded it.
I did not hear that.
So, but it is seconded.
All right, so let's go back then. Andrew, do you want to repeat the motion you made?
I move that we retain the context that we published in our letter signed by Lenny Singletary, whatever the date is, I don't have it in front of me, asking it that it be called Abolitionist Park. And I don't have that Letty's letter in front of me. If it said anything else in there, abolitionist dash park would be what I'd say that we should leave it in.
Okay, do I hear a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, is there any discussion on that motion? All right, Taya, do you want to call the roll on this, please?
Candace Ferrison registers a vote of yes to both motions. So I don't know how you want to interpret that. She's having technical difficulties. Zoller Gringer, how do you vote on the current motion?
No.
Lastoweski, how do you vote?
Yes.
Harrison says yes. Hubbard Common non-Mary?
Yes.
Levinton?
Yes.
Elby?
I wasn't here in 1999 and I vote no.
Quint?
No.
Smith?
No.
That is 4 yes, 4 no.
I don't think you can vote yes on both motions.
How?
So is Candace come back yet?
Please hold.
I don't see Candace here. All right. So you, Dwight?
Yes, the question is, who's our parliamentarian? What happened?
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that question unless John can help us out or Taya. I think we just voted now. The vote was to leave it the way it was, Abolitionist Park.
Yeah, so I guess that's.
I think if we put this forward clearly at the executive committee, I will explain exactly what happened. And that there seemed to be as many votes in favor of calling it Abolitionist Place as not calling as, keeping it as Abolitionist Park.
Well, you have no vote on this motion. If the second motion doesn't have the same split, then you will have a recommendation from the committee. What you just did is not a recommendation from the committee. It's not a recommendation. It didn't say no, it didn't say yes, it said nothing. So you are allowed to vote again.
No, it said an equal number of people had opinions.
That's my point. So that's not a recommendation from the committee. This is a committee's recommendation. A tie vote is not a recommendation from the committee.
This was not a tie vote. It was 4 to 3.
Thank you for your patience. The final vote is no. She votes no. So the conclusion is 5 no, 3 yes.
That's what I thought.
Wait, we only have 7 votes, I think, not 8.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You have 8.
We do have 8. All right, so can you just explain, did we have?
That means that the committee by 1 vote voted to reject keeping Abolitionist Park. So now the floor is open for new motions.
Okay, now you're sure about that?
She's correct.
Vote on a motion.
All right, no, okay, I misunderstood something. All right, thank you. All right, so the floor is open again for motions.
Dwight has a motion. Is going to reintroduce that.
Yeah, so let me reintroduce my motion, please, to support Abolitionist Place.
And we have a second to that? Suzanne? Thank you. Any discussion? Okay. Taya, do you want to call the roll on that?
Yes, one moment, please. And thank goodness this is being recorded. Candace Harrison sends hers. Apologies. Zoller Gringer, how do you vote on the suggestion of Abolitionist Place?
Yes.
Lastowecki, how do you vote on Abolitionist Place?
Abstain.
Abstain. Candace Harrison votes yes for Abolitionist Place. Hubbard Kamunanwiri,
No.
Leventon,
Abstain.
Melby.
Yes.
That was a yes.
Yes. Yes.
Apologies for the proof of Brooklyn in the background. Quint.
Yes.
And Smith.
Yes.
That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yes, 1 no, 2 abstain.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank
John.
you for that. Barbara, I'm going to leave now. It's 9 o'clock.
No, you can't leave. You can't leave. You have to stay. Okay.
Thank you all so much
Thank you.
for a very exciting Monday night.
It's not over yet. All right. Do any committee? Oh, my chairperson's report. I originally was going to be talking about the designation of Willoughby Square. We've obviously discussed that. I just want to mention. I wanted to follow up on those of you who have so willingly volunteered to look after a park, and it's. I apologize for not getting back to you sooner. But I'm going to be sending out some suggestions that Andrew put together for what you might look for at some of these parks. I would ask that if you've volunteered to look at a park that has a friends group, maybe you want to also volunteer to look at a park that doesn't have a friends group. And I think we heard pretty loudly and clearly tonight about some of the needs of some of the parks or playgrounds. And I think that's what this, if you have an opportunity in the next few weeks, so that when you come back to our June meeting and we talk about the statement of needs, you have a good idea of where you think we really should be focusing our recommendations for in the statement of needs. So I would just mention that. So I'm going to jump now to other committee business. Does anyone else on the committee have something they want us to address at 9:10?
Yes.
Yes, Carolyn, go ahead.
Very briefly, just a statement. I have concern that we as a committee, although we voted on Fort Greene Park for that first phase with the Parks Without Borders, it's something we will have to revisit because an environmental statement that the judge says has to be done could possibly have new information. And because part of the reason that was done by the judge was because there was a discrepancy between what the consultant said and what was reported to us for information on the basis of which we voted. So I'm just saying we need to revisit.
He did seem to say he'd be back with that. So
no, I'm
thank
saying
you.
we as a committee, we need to discuss things among ourselves and come up with some of our own concerns and not just wait until we are reacting to Marty Moore or anybody else.
Okay, that sounds reasonable, and I think that also ties into us going out and being proactive, looking at our parks and playgrounds. So thank you for bringing that up.
But I am specifically talking about
Fort Greene, right? Okay. Well, we certainly could set up a session to talk about Fort Greene Park. And I mean, we did. You're sort of saying let's revisit phases 1 and 2, so to speak. I think, or 3, and that we were looking at phase 4 tonight, this edition.
Carolyn, are you saying when the environmental assessment report comes out, or is that what you're suggesting the trigger is for
Well, I'm
revisiting?
saying that clearly a court is telling us that the environmental assessment should have been done.
Yes.
And since it wasn't, and they're expanding it to talk about the whole park, which kind of muffles what happened in the first portion for Parks Without Borders. And we need to discuss that. I'm not saying we do it tonight because it's already 9:15.
Yeah.
No, and I don't think this assessment is going to take in the whole park. It said about a little over 10 acres.
Barbara, it's going to take under consideration the 3 last phases. The first 2 that
Right.
voted on, and now this last one that
Additional one.
to make it
Right.
10. The 10th acre makes it subject to getting an assessment.
Right.
And I think maybe we should get the result of the assessment and sort of protect ourselves and say, we want to hear the results of that assessment.
Well,
And,
The results will determine
and the
whether.
judge said it had to be done.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
We want to, in a sense, open up ourselves to the possibility that we would like to hear the outcome of that assessment.
Well,
And
you
find-
know, maybe we could invite the independent contractor who will be doing it to come and talk to us once he or she issues their statement.
Now, we have no control over that because he's not our hiree, but we could.
Well, we could invite the person.
We could stipulate that we want the Department of Parks Brooklyn to give us the results of that assessment so we could completely review our approach. I don't know how to word it at the end there.
No, but I certainly got the impression that that's going to be a public document and we'll all be seeing it.
Well, the documents weren't all public before, and that was part of the problem. And that's what all of those disgruntled people are talking about. I mean, let's be frank about it. That's what's going on.
Right. Well, there certainly is concern about the trees, and I don't think I didn't hear anybody speaking tonight who felt confident that those trees should be removed,
Yes.
other than Marty Marr.
Yes.
So
I think it's a good suggestion to invite the independent company to come. I mean, I think we should at least try for that.
yeah,
We won't get it if we don't try.
right. And if anyone could get it for us, it would be Taya. So, okay.
Failing to get him to come to us, at some point I'd like to insist that that we have access to that environmental status or whatever it's called. That it be brought to our committee so we can analyze it.
Okay. No, I think that makes sense. Brooklyn CB, I can't see this. Thank you for bringing that up and keeping us focused on it. I appreciate that. Excuse me, any other committee business?
I don't want to talk anymore. I just wanted to ask somebody if they could, there's an important park at the edge of our district, and that's Crispus Attucks Park, and nobody's looking at it. If somebody from our committee could take that upon themselves to visit and sort of analyze what's going on at that park.
I'll do that.
Okay. It's an important park.
Unless someone else wants it, but oh, Jennifer, you would take it? Are you familiar with it? Oh, okay. All right. All right. So Jennifer, this is your night for giving. So you'll take Crispus Attucks. Okay. Now we're moving to community forum. If there's anyone here who needs to speak, it's 2 minutes. Do we have anybody signed up?
Morrow. Mr. Morrow has been waiting a very long time.
All right. Is there anyone else who is signed up for tonight?
No.
No one. All right. Richard.
Yes.
We are always very, very welcoming to you and have given you much time. Can we please keep it to 2 minutes tonight?
I'm going to go fast.
I haven't had dinner yet.
Okay, me either. All right, I just want to report that the New York City Park Stewardship Program is now offering street tree care training remote. There are 2 programs going on this month. One, I have them listed there on the 20th and the 25th, so you can register for either one of those. Please, if you know someone, it's a great, it's about an hour and a half, but you learn so much. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and that's the other tag at the bottom there, the third one, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Drexel University study on urban park usage during the COVID-19 pandemic. It surveyed park visitors over a 3-month period from May to July 2020 at small and mid-sized parks in New York and Philadelphia. What it found is that regardless of city or social vulnerability of the adjacent neighborhoods, in areas that were more densely populated, parks tended to see more use. But this increased usage did not equate to higher transmission of COVID-19, which was more closely associated with the vulnerability of the neighborhoods, according to the study. You can check the study out there. I just wanted to say parks are safe and essential, and wish you all a good night, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Richard. All right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Andrew?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, I'll second that. All right. I
Okay,
assume there
good
are no
night.
objections. Thank you very much. And those of you who are still with us at this point, have a good night.
Thank you, Jennifer, for taking the minutes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.